republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have some additional agendas down here on the table. If anybody's interested, it's certainly welcome to them. First on the agenda this evening is Steve Lombard and the trustees of reservation. So, Steve, I'll turn that over to you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Board of Selectmen, ladies and gentlemen, I received a request from Mr. Detwiller concerning the Barrett Farm purchase. You have in your packet a complete description of what they're looking for. You notice that they're purchasing a piece of property for around $700,000. $351,000 that come from resources, others from the trustees. The request is coming before the Board of Selectmen. Your minutes indicate that the Agricultural Council has already approved use of the funds that were appropriated at a previous town meeting for just this type of purpose. It requires a vote of the Board of Selectmen to use those funds. Also, once this process is completed, and another reason I invited the Finance Committee to be here tonight was to listen to it, because if the board approves it, I have to go before the Finance Committee and ask their approval also, so we can send it down to the treasurer to borrow the money. Mr. Detwiller.
Chris, do you want to introduce?
Sure, yeah, I'm Chris Detwiller. I'm Chris Detwiller from the Trustees of Reservations, and to my right is Ryan Mann from the Westport Land Conservation Trust. To my left, Chris Chisholm from the Massachusetts Department of Agricultural Resources, and the three of us are here as three of the four partners in the project, and the town hopefully being the fourth. So we've been working with Mrs. Barrett for a few months now on her farm to protect her farm on Division Road. You might be familiar with it. It's just up from the southern end of Division Road. At Division and East Horse Neck is what was the Dunette Farm, now Hilltop Farm. We partnered with the town to protect that a number of years ago. And just abutting that to the north is Debbie Barrett's farm, which we are working with her to protect with an agricultural preservation restriction. So we're actually we'd be acquiring a agricultural preservation restriction on the property, not the property itself. We've negotiated a purchase price for the APR of $700,000, which represents a pretty significant bargain sale as an appraisal, appraised it at $1.4 million, which is really exciting. The Department of Ag Resources, which will actually be acquiring and holding the APR and would be co-holding it with the town, assuming the town approves the funding, is able to put in $348,600 towards the project, leaving $351,400 to be raised from the local match, as the program calls it. We, the trustees and the land trust, are committed to raising a little over $200,000 plus the project expenses, and request that the town, through the Ag Open Space Preservation Trust Funds, participate through a contribution of $150,000 from that fund, and in given those funds, the town would also be a co-holder of the agricultural preservation restriction.
I like that. One thing I like to add, Mr. Chairman, the reason we're here tonight is because they anticipate a closing in January. And that's the reason we missed the special town meeting, and we couldn't carry it forward to the annual town meeting where you see a letter from CPC noting that they would approve a project this time and would provide the money. That's why we're here tonight.
Right. So
we couldn't make the time meeting dates.
So the Ag Open Space Fund approved the funding, but said, please go to the CPC and see if they would be able to approve it, so we wouldn't have to borrow the money. We did go to the CPC, and they were really enthusiastic about it as well, and did vote to move it forward to their public hearing and then town meeting in the spring, with the anticipation that once approved at town meeting, that could be used to repay, pay off the amount borrowed now. So it would only be borrowing money for a brief period of time. So that would round out the project.
Any questions for board members on this?
I have a couple questions.
Sure.
Chris, thank you. The end game is to obtain the funds from CPC. which I think is a good plan. There's the better part of $2 million available for spending from CPC in fiscal 15. So that, you'd have to wait for the money until July 1st, right?
Yeah, right, I believe so, yeah.
So why is it, and not that we want to avoid spending the money that we've agreed to spend or agreed to borrow and reimburse for with this agricultural fund, but why wouldn't we wait until July if we can have one transaction instead of having two?
Because of the timing of the project, and one of the reasons the Ag Open Space Fund was approved the way it was, is that with real estate transactions, you're tied to a lot of different timelines, which may not enable, it makes waiting until every annual town meeting can make it difficult to get a deal put together and close on a specific timeline. So this project, for this timeline to work out, we do need to close by January, which is why we would need the funding approved.
But can you help us understand why January? Why can't we? There's no property changing hands, right? We're going to purchase a restriction, and everybody stays in place, and there's a money transaction. Why can't we wait until July?
Just as part of what the landowner and farmer needs to make the project work is to be able to receive those funds in a timely manner, without having to wait an additional several months.
Okay, and my other question is for Steve, and he can explain it. For those folks who don't understand the fund, like myself, how is that money made available, and does that affect tax rates, and how does it get paid back, and all that, Steve?
The article that was approved town meeting is a Proposition 2.5 borrowing article. So anytime funds are drawn from that fund, it requires payment beyond the tax levy. So that $150,000 would appear in the tax levy, but by the time we pay it back, it'll be into the next fiscal year. So when speaking with the treasurer, he indicated to me that he would have to borrow the money on a short-term basis and then use the CPC money to pay it back. But it still couldn't put the money back into the fund again because you've already drawn down on it for this fiscal year.
So where does the money go? If we pay it back, and we can't put it back into the fund,
The money,
yeah, the $150,000.
it's my understanding, speaking to the treasurer, that he's going to borrow the money. It won't be paid until next fiscal year, but the money borrowed is affected in this fiscal year. So fiscal 15, you wouldn't feel the impact on it. It'd be the fiscal 14 would be the impact on the borrowing. So it would affect the day. I couldn't put the money back in time to affect the tax rate not being affected by that.
So when we put that on the tax bill, is it put on the tax bill over, it's a short-term bond, so it's going to be just for the period of...
It'd be one time, it'd be like he's talking about, he was at that time talking about a 1 year note.
So the taxpayers will pay back the $150,000
Yes.
to the town.
Yes.
But that won't go back into the agricultural fund. That'll go into the general fund.
To go back to the general. My understanding. I was hoping, George said he might be here tonight, but I guess he couldn't make it. But
I would agree with that. I think that's
my
I have a
understanding.
little bit of experience with
Yeah.
this. In full disclosure, that's my interest, obviously, in agriculture, and I think there's been a lot of APRs. We have the state folks here for APRs, and this really is having a farm sell the development rights to the property to stay in farming. And to do that, there's some money up front that changes hands to the farmer for doing that. And that's what this transaction really entails. Typically, and I'm a member of the Agricultural Open Space Council, we had asked Chris to go to CPC first because we wanted to do this, if we could, without the transaction taking place through borrowing, because the funds were at hand, as you just asked. But I guess, and well, you know, I would take Chris's word here, I guess it didn't work out in terms of those negotiations and with the family involved in the APR, and this was the best they could do in terms of the time frame. So there's a little bit of overlap, and it will mean that we'll draw down from our ability to bond in the future for this kind of transaction. We'll be short $150,000 from what the balance is right now. But in the long run, it'll be a wash for the town using the CPC monies. It was unfortunate CPC couldn't couldn't have done something at the last, meeting, but I'm sure they had the reasons why that couldn't work out. But I would support this. I think this is good for the town. The farm will stay in private ownership. There'll be a reduction because of the agricultural preservation restriction, but it'll stay for generations in agriculture, and that's, I think that's healthy for everybody, so.
I agree with everything the guy just said. I think it's a good way of doing that, preserving the land. But I think the 150 is wrong. We're gonna be paying interest on that 150. So I think we should go to CPC, you should be going 151,000, whatever it's gonna be. I wanna make it whole. I don't want the town to pay. We already been putting 2.5%, or 2%, whatever we're putting into, 3% into CPC. And we're putting money into that. So let's take all that money out of there. I don't wanna say we take 150, and yet the townspeople, we're still paying all the interest, whatever it's gonna be. It may not be a lot, but it's still.
The treasurer spoke exactly about that.
Yeah.
That we will present the whole ticket.
The whole ticket.
There may be an issue with using CPC funds for something other than a real interest that the town ends up in. So in other words, a real interest, and maybe you folks will know, is property, conservation restriction, an open space restriction. But paying interest with CPC, I think, is probably going to be problematic.
Well, if
I
you just
don't-
go borrow more
yeah.
money, or somebody should.
No, I don't know. Let me stop. I don't think that's a problem. When this came before, I asked Steve to check because I felt the same way in terms of interest and principal. And my understanding is the treasurer is supporting that, and I would assume CPC would as well. We're trying to be fair, we're trying to move this forward, but obviously by the transaction taking place in this form, there's an additional cost to the town. And we hope that the trustees would look at that and try to resolve that with the CPC.
We don't know what the cost of the short term is gonna be borrowing at that particular time, because if we can get a 9-month, we'll get a 9-month one.
Yep.
So it's just it's the logistics of it that we have to get beyond, get to the town meetings.
See, the larger problem that I see, and I'm just coming to this understanding by way of Steve's explanation tonight, is we're taking $150,000 of agricultural trust fund monies, temporarily using it for a purpose that it was intended for, paying it back and putting that money into the general fund. And that's, so we're taking agricultural trust fund money and throwing it right into the general fund. That's what we're doing.
Well, that was a decision that CPC made. I mean, I can't, they must have had the reasons for doing it. I requested that they go to CPC and see if we could do this. CPC came back with this kind of recommendation to Chris, and that's what he's following. So it wasn't, I mean, the Ag Open Space Council met and suggested that they go to CPC. We want to support this. If it didn't work out, then we would try to look at other arrangements, but try to exhaust the possibility of going with CPC. CPC determined that this was a time frame that they're recommending. I asked Steve if they were going to do that, were they prepared to handle the interest as well. I was assured that they were, so I mean, I don't know what else we could do outside of delaying this for the people that are involved, and according to Chris, that may jeopardize the situation. If it didn't jeopardize, I'd say definitely let's wait till July, but it sounds like it's time sensitive.
Can we get a commitment from either Mass Department of Agricultural Resources, I don't know if they can, or the Westport Land Trust, to say, look, if worse comes to worse, we'll go back to our people and just to pay the interest. If we can't get that interest from CPC, say borrow 151,000, I'm just using that for a number, that somebody else will pick it up, because the town's already put in 150,000. That's all I'm saying. Nickels and dimes. I'm not gonna die on it.
The other solution is, rather than go into the general fund, have the money go straight into the stabilization fund. Then it goes to a purpose that stabilization funds were generally used for. But if you go back to the article that was voted at the town meeting, it was for this specific purpose. So whether the CPC paid the money or didn't, the purpose of the article was for this exact type of situation. So
I'm just concerned that
both
it's not,
sides to it.
we're using money for a purpose other than what it was intended to be used for.
I'm not sure if the CBC would know, and I hadn't known that the money would not be going back into the bond. I'm not sure if they knew that specific detail.
Well, it's because it's a Prop 2.5.
See, I like using CPC money because there is a lot of CPC money right now, and it's a perfect project for CPC. On the other hand, we have, as a town, agreed that we will borrow and pay back a bond to do just this sort of thing. And going by the book, it's almost be better if we didn't take the CPC money and we took the $150,000 and And normally, we would spread that out over how many years, Steve?
Well, whatever the term of the bond would be. I mean, you try not to spread it out too long. You try to.
Like 5 years,
spread it
7
out
years,
5
10 years?
Tops.
So 5 years would have a lower impact. I mean, we're not talking about a huge impact to the taxpayers, but
Yeah, that's certainly an option, because then that would reserve CBC money for another, the next farmland protection project that comes up. The timeline would work out better, then that money would still be in CBC coffers at that time for that, so that's an option as well.
I mean, I'm in favor of the project. I think that the shortcut we're taking is diverting funds away from their intended purpose and putting them into the general fund, which we do need money, but I just don't think that's the way we want to be augmenting our general fund.
So you know the original purpose of the article that was voted by town meeting. That's the solution.
Yeah.
Rather than going, it was an offer made by CPC prior to the town meeting, is this way of doing it. I don't think they realized at that particular time that, that you couldn't put the money back in once you took it out, because it overlaps in different fiscal years. So I mean,
I would
it was
entertain a
gesture.
motion regardless of whether CPC puts money back in or not. I think this is a legitimate request. The money is fairly small when you're talking about the size of property we're talking about. We have a state commitment on this. They've evaluated the soils. I think it's what the Trust Council is responsible to do. And, it's $150,000 out of a $750,000 commitment. And I think it's in the best interest of the town. Now, I would hope that CPC is independent. They can decide how they're going to handle it. We've got an email that says they're going to handle it in a certain way. I know they've talked to the treasurer and whatever. If that works out, fine. And if not, until they take a vote, and that vote still has to go to town meeting, and town meeting has to weigh in on it. So there'll be a lot of checks and balances along the way, but I hate to see this get delayed. And again, it's good faith. You're telling me this, so I'm believing it's time sensitive, and have no reason not to believe you. So based on good faith judgment on this deal, I would certainly entertain a motion that we move on to it. Motion, do we have a second?
I'll second it with the understanding that the funds will be borrowed on a time basis that would be normal, not expecting to get CPC funds. In other words, if we would normally do 5 years, let's do 5 years. We wouldn't do 7 months or 9 months.
But, another question, so technically, we're still, we'll be paying more than $150,000, that's all I'm saying. They're saying we're borrowing 100, our cost is gonna be greater than 150,000. If somebody else is picking up that extra, I don't feel so bad. That's my only issue. I think it's a great project. I like to see it work. I think everything is good. But in that case, we should be borrowing $151,000 or whatever.
Well, maybe that needs clarification. Steve, we must borrow the amount that needs to be repaid, right?
It'll be both in interest and principal, just like our budget.
So it's not going to be 150 no matter whether we do it 7 months or 10 years.
Would make a
more
difference.
money than 150. We're putting in more
It would make any difference. All the thing is, you're authorizing the use of $150,000 from that. Our answer is to go, the town's already auzed us to borrow that money. So we borrow the money, part of it goes into long-term debt, and part of it goes into interest. So you split it up no matter how you do it.
Motion on the floor in a second.
Was my conditional accepted?
Was his conditional accepted?
What was that, to borrow the phone?
My condition was that we borrow it as if we weren't going to get it paid back by CPC, and we execute the bond process and the grant, or whatever we call it, as a whatever, how many years we would normally do, 5 years, 7 years,
Well,
2 years, I don't know.
if George has a bond going out, he'll include that in the bond.
Actually, I don't even see how you can do that.
No,
Because
I can't see the taxpayers paying
the board has done the funding on this. There are other committees that have to weigh in on voting on it. I don't know how you could bring it to the finance committee without having an exact amount in it. It's a feel-good type vote, but they have to have an exact amount at some point. The agricultural open space has voted on 150,000. If you're going more out of their fund, they need to know that. They need to take a vote. So we're not in a position, unless we go with 150, we're not in a position to vote on it tonight anyways.
I'll move it as presented. I'm interested.
Because you have to have all those votes before, there's a sequence of events that you have to do before you can go to bonding.
Yeah.
So you'd have to go back, it can be done, but it'll be delayed for another 2 weeks. You'd have to go back and have all those committees meet again, and then go through that process and formalize it. I mean, I thought over the last 6 months that was being done. We had a meeting last July on this, and I thought that's what they were doing when you went to CPC, quite frankly. I thought you were ironing that out, so.
Why can't we dedicate it to go back into the fund?
Well, we,
The funds come out.
Because the authorization is under Proposition 2.5.
Right, but we can't do it under a question at town meeting even?
No, because you're drawing money, you're borrowing money now in January. Okay, your town meeting's not until May, and CPC money can't be used till July 1st, which crosses into the next fiscal year. If everything happened within this fiscal year, we wouldn't have a problem. It's because it's crossing over.
But I mean, even if it's in for a period of time till the next town meeting, or if we have a fall, to subplant it back into that fund, I would think we could do that as a question.
No, you can't, because once, under Proposition 2.5, you've already borrowed the money outside of the general
All right.
fund.
Steve, don't they give you enough time, within a couple of weeks after July 1st, that funds that were up there that would be paying?
No, because it's paid in July 1st. It crosses into the next fiscal year.
I don't believe we can't transfer from the general into the fund, but.
I think we're getting bogged down in some of the other issues that are appropriate, but probably should be done with the treasurer and report back.
I'll make sure I get all that
As
information.
far
I'll
as,
second the
as
motion.
far as the 150, I think
You already did
either we
it.
have to vote that up and down this
Conditional.
evening, and give some direction to these folks going
I would
forward.
suggest that you go with 150. You know, I feel that we can perform that, and George will give us Mr. Foster, the treasurer, will give us a lot better information than what I'm bringing to you now.
The reason I dwelled on it is because we seem to have two people on the fence, and I want to try to.
No,
get
I
that.
understand,
Yep.
I understand, yeah. Quite frankly, that's where I was 6 months ago, but I'm listening to Chris, and I'm listening to the business manager, and they've assured me that they've done their due diligence, and that this is the best they can do under the circumstances, so in good faith, I'm going along with that. If I heard something different, I'd
There's one
certainly
other
be
thing that we
objecting.
could have done, and that is that CPC now made use of last year for the first time, and this year for the second time, a thing called budgeted reserves. Budgeted reserves can be expended, they still need a town meeting, they could have done it at this last town meeting, but we can spend money in the current fiscal year. We don't have to wait, but it has to be budgeted from previous years. And we've got $250,000 in that reserve right now. So that unfortunately, I think that's something that could have been done, but for future reference.
Okay, yeah, I didn't
Yeah.
know that, and we talked to the CBC, they didn't mention that. It's an option.
Well, this was the direction that we gave the agricultural open space back in July. So shame on folks that didn't know, because that's kind of what we're asking them to do. But
I'll
people
second-
chose not to go that route.
I'll second Steve's motion unconditionally, but my understanding is that we will have a chance to, because I don't think it's right to pay back the funds and still have people paying on the loan and that money going to the general fund. But that's a separate issue, and we'll have their checks and balances, as you mentioned, Tony, so I'll second your motion.
Okay, I want to call a question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No, I'm for it.
For it? Okay, chair votes aye, it's unanimous. Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you for the work of the state on this. Appreciate it.
I mean, like I say,
A good partner over the
if we
years.
could have said 150 as the max, including interest, I don't feel so bad.
Okay, Steve, we're a little bit delayed, but you're part of the responsibility for the delay, so we're into your section of the meeting now. This is a budget review and schedule. And the Finance Committee and School Committee have been invited to this. I saw an email again tonight suggesting that I called the meeting, and I did see an email from Steve trying to explain that was not called or set up a meeting by the chair. This was something that was invited by the business manager to share with various boards the information that he wants to do this evening. So I think there was a misunderstanding about that.
Early in September, I presented to the Board of Selectmen revenue picture for the town.
Why don't you take a mic with your, pull one off there or whatever.
You have a seat? Why do you need that?
want to hold it?
Yes, please. I'm tripping over the wires. Thank you. Early in September, I presented revenue figures to the Board of Selectmen that indicated that at that particular time, that we had a total revenue available to the town for FY14, $895,000 more than we had in the previous fiscal year. And in addition to that, I've outlined to the Board of Selectmen how those revenues were to be split up between the schools and the town, and indicating that there'd be a maximum budget. Since that time, I presented other figures to the Board of Selectmen that recognized an impact due to the police department settlement, and it was just projection at that particular time. Now that's come to fruition because of the town meeting. I've had to redo those numbers again. In light of that, the Board of Selectmen, in latter part of September, voted to have a policy of not using one-time revenues to support the budget. In the previous year, you'll notice that they had used approximately $490,000 in free cash and $100,000 in overlay surplus to support their FY14 budget. And when I made that presentation to the Board of Selectmen at that time, I made my 5-year projection based on carrying that number for free cash over that. But since the proposal and policy by the Board of Selectmen was not to use that, I've had to redo my figures. And again, this is what I presented to the Board of Selectmen back in early September. Moving forward, again, this shows the same budget analysis that we did and how the revenues were supposed to be split up. And as you know, in my presentation to the Board of Selectmen, I told this would be a floating type of revenue analysis that's predicated on everything remaining the same and no changes happening. And as we all know, changes do happen, and the projection moving forward indicates not using any free cash going to FY15, that we have a total of $305,000 available to us for both town and school. And using the analysis that we use to project a revenue split between town and school of 54% going to the town and 56% going to the school, 54% going to school and 46% going to the town. As you can see, rather than the $400,000 that we projected, it's been greatly reduced down to $163,000 for school and $141,000 for the town. And carrying that number even further, this second page indicates what we have to budget for both town and school to remain within Proposition 2.5 and have a balanced budget here. That gives the town a budget of $15,105,000 that I have to hit to in order to adhere to the Selectmen's policy, and it gives the school department a $16 million budget that they need to come to in order to stay within Proposition 2.5. And when I carry this further, when I bring in the FY14 budget, the police settlement, the amended budget for FY14 was $15.4 million. The things that we know about, the police arbitration, there's another $64,000 because of a step in the settlement for FY15. The increase in town debt of $152,000. Anticipated school increases and salary increases indicates that what it all shakes down to is that I'm looking at a budget of $15.7 million, and I have $15.1 million to get to. So I'm looking at reductions of about $643,000 I have to make to the town budget in order to meet the Proposition 2.5 figure, and I'm working on that number now.
The process is, on or before December 15th, I will be presenting a budget to the Board of Selectmen that will be within Proposition 2.5, and will be making the cuts in order to meet those numbers. Once the Board of Selectmen receives that, the process will be that they will meet with various departments that they wish to meet to on the budget process, and give those departments the opportunity to meet with the Board of Selectmen and make their requests contrary to what I presented to the Board of Selectmen. But the Board of Selectmen needs to realize that if they increase the budget, they're going to have to decrease the budget someplace else to stay within that number, because I'm going to be right at that number. Once they do that, the process the board should adhere to is that they will in turn vote a bottom line budget, and that becomes the town budget that goes to the Finance Committee, and the Finance Committee will review that number that the Board of Selectmen have. And moving forward, the Finance Committee will do whatever they do, and however they meet, however they're going to meet the need to stay within that number. And hopefully at the end of the process that we can all meet together and resolve our differences and go to town meeting with a unified budget for the town to vote on. So that becomes a process that I've used in several towns. It's been very successful in doing that. And that's the process I bring to the Board of Selectmen. When you hired me back last June, that's what I explained to you back then. I'd like the board to know that several of the policies that the Board of Selectmen wanted me to attack. One was a 5-year projection. I've given you that. You've asked for a capital improvements plan. That's prepared and ready to go to the Capital Improvements Committee. We've had a couple of meetings already, so I've met that deadline for you. And also the issue about the process of bidding out contracts for the town and 30B and other issues that we've had to meet. So we've been able to meet all those points that you wanted me to do while I was here as your business manager. So we're at the juncture now. I want to make sure that I don't do this in a vacuum. I have a lot of people to thank. I need to thank my town accountant, the assistant. I need to thank George Foster, Carol Borden for all the help, Sharon down in Sharon Potter. Those people all helped put this together for me and be the finances officer of the town. And without them, I could not achieve a lot of things I was able to do without their cooperation. And finally, I want to commend the department heads because they met all my deadlines for submitting the budget to me and be able to get it to you ahead of time. And without them, there could have been some holdouts, but they were very cooperative with me in meeting that need. So that becomes the picture is about $300,000 worse than what it was last September when I met with you. At that time, there's some issues that we didn't know about that we finally resolved. We know where we stand now. So if the board has any questions, I'll be glad to answer those questions. But I wanted the FinCom to be here. So two things. One is the Barrett Farm, and one was this issue about the finances. So everybody has the same picture at the same time. I've shared these numbers with Ms. Dargon from the school department, and so she has these numbers. And Jack and I sat with her and had a very productive meeting with her on this issue. So she's aware of what the issues that we have to deal with.
Questions, board members?
Are the variables in there, Steve? Like the veterans reimbursements, overdue taxes, carryover from last year, the expected extra revenue? Is all of that put in there?
The
Meals tax, room tax, veterans reimbursement, we expect a nice chunk of change. The overdue taxes carryover.
The veterans issue comes through in your cherry sheet.
Right. Okay.
That's all figured in your state aid.
Yeah.
Okay? As I presented to you early on, they're conservative in nature. I expect there to be some changes. Not a great change, just like your added growth figure. Your actually added growth figure came out to $85,000 more than what you projected. I projected the same amount going.
I think, what's that?
No, saying we're gonna get the mic sooner or later.
Yeah.
I projected the same amount last year for added growth. I don't expect there to be a tremendous amount of added growth. I don't expect there to be a tremendous amount of estimated receipts coming in, but I do expect to be some minor changes in revenue coming. The biggest thing that would come would be the state aid package. But I always caution my boards of selectmen, do not listen to the additional state aid you're going to get. Make sure you understand what the state charges are going to be. And that's the green part of the cherry sheet. So you got to see that part, because they give it in one hand, they take it away on the other hand. So not knowing what those numbers are. So the figures I give you are net. I do speak some slight increases, but not to the extent that the cavalry's coming right over the hill to save you.
Any other comments, board members?
Just clarification from me, Steve. You're projecting 642,000 in additional townside cuts that we need to make for 15, fiscal 15.
Yes.
But we don't need to make any additional cuts for fiscal 14.
No, 14 is all balanced out. We're good to go. And this number I did was early on. It'll be a little bit less than this. It'll be just under 600,000 I'm looking at, because if you notice, I put an amount in here for salaries, what a 1% would mean. I put that in there just so I can get where I'm at, okay? And the numbers I'll give you, you know, that's why I don't want to project any further, because some of those monies that come in, additionally, you may want to use that for negotiations. Okay?
When I look at this, I look at our present budget, and our present budget includes not only the funds we had available, but by your description here, 490 in free cash and 100,000 in the overlay. You add those together, that's 590,000. You're off a little over 600,000. Basically, it's kind of working with last year's assumptions, because we use funds for one-time funds, basically, to run operations. That's part of what I think got us into a bind in the last few years. And what you're suggesting is trying to address that to start off with. I think it's fair to acknowledge that we do have money in stabilization, we do have money in free cash, but that's kind of how we got into the situation to start with. And we possibly could draw from those, and there may be interest at town meeting to do that. If we do that, that further develops that structural deficit, if you would, for operations.
Yes.
So we've had a tendency in the last few years to spend money for operations out of accounts that you don't use for operations. And there's nothing wrong with that, but we need to acknowledge as a town that we're doing that, because at some point, if you keep on drawing from savings, the mortgage is still due, but you don't have any money in savings to pay for the mortgage. That's kind of what we're getting at now. In some communities, people went bankrupt because of that kind of financing. So at some point, we've got to fiscally look at this and see how we're going to address it.
I mean, you got to address it, because, you know, because of your policy voted by this board, I've changed the numbers. It'd have been a lot easier if I were able to use the same numbers that we used last year. My numbers do not include free cash overlay surplus. That's why these numbers are greatly reduced. If I was able to use it, it'd be a lot better picture than we're drawing right now.
For operations for that year, but
Yep.
that just kicks the ball down the road.
Oh,
the
yeah, right.
following year, where you would actually make cuts that are going to be
You're right.
greater in operations just to survive what funds are available, because you
You're
don't
right.
have the savings to draw from.
But as we go along, we start reducing these budgets down, there's going to be less free cash coming in, because a great amount of turnbacks supported that free cash. And I think that Mr. Healy at your last selectmen's meeting made it clear to you that although we looked at $1.3 million in free cash certification, that's not going to be there next year. I mean, don't even count on it.
Understand.
If you get around $600,000, we ought to be tap dancing in the street. But, you know, it won't reach that again.
That's 642, that's the bottom line, that's additional revenue needed. That's everything, that's town side, school side, in other words,
No.
Oh, that's just town.
Town.
that's just town.
Just town.
I'm sure the
I've-
school's going to have their own set of questions in terms of how they can
haven't-
work within the budget and the funds that are available. I think there's some real problems on both sides.
Yeah, I mean, I think the chairman of the board identified that you would have $1.5 million to $2 million structural deficit that you need to deal with. So we need, we're trying to deal with it, and these reductions, when I bring them back to you, there's some people that are not going to be happy. But, I must say that the majority of department heads that I speak to realize what it is. And I could tell by the budgets they presented that they fully understand what it is. But that creates a morale issue and become pervasive in negativity, in that they don't see a clear picture coming in the future. They just see we're treading water. We're not really getting ahead, and it creates a problem. Because like I say, you've got good employees here, good department heads here, and they see that there's not any positive moving forward, and we have equipment that we need, there's other infrastructure things we need, that need to be addressed, and that's how we should address it with the free cash, and we're not doing that. We're trying to
Well, we've been told
operate.
by auditors, we've been told by Department of Revenue that we're spending beyond our means.
Yes.
And we're spending one-time funds for operations. It shouldn't be a surprise. I mean, and we can make a decision as a town going forward that we could continue to do that.
Absolutely.
But eventually, that's going to come back to have a dramatic effect. And in some cases, towns have gone bankrupt with that kind of fiscal policy, so. It's a community decision. It's not going to be
Absolutely.
done at this level. So it's pretty much at the voters' level and town meeting. But I think people should be aware, eyes open going forward, and decisions are made, the impact of those decisions. And when we say we have a structural deficit, it's fact, it's not fiction.
I want people to realize that these are the revenues. These are the numbers, okay? And they're conservative nature because, I'm not in favor of raising taxes any more than anybody else is. But I want to present a clear picture to them that shows them that, I don't have a hidden resource someplace I'm going to draw money from. They know you have so much in stabilization, so much in free cash and overlay. Those are the three other funds. And once you use that up, the fight's over. Then now you're relegated to using nothing else, so.
And you get down a road that it's tough to recover because we've heard reports from the schools in terms of at some point they're going to need some funding, whether it's 16 million or 38 million or another figure. We're going to have to do some bonding as a community, and our bond rating certainly is going to be affected by decisions we make in stabilization and free cash.
Yes.
So. Any other questions, comments? Anybody from the audience? John, certainly. John from the Finance Committee. John Miller. John, why don't you use the mic so they can hear you? John, the mic so people can hear you. Or you come up here if you want, whatever. Shauna, if you want to come up too, Shauna, it's the Finance Committee, you're certainly welcome to. If you have questions. Would you pull that next to you, John, so people can hear you?
Okay. Steve, in this analysis, you've assumed that there are no other warrant articles that can be funded, that are funded here, right?
Just in the past, you haven't funded using tax revenue to fund articles. You've used funds that have been established through various committees. You've used money for enterprise funds and things like that. No, it does not make room for articles to be funded out of the general fund money.
Yeah, but it seems to me there are always a few articles that want to come out of taxation. Your assumption on these numbers is there isn't any room for that. That's all additional to this. Is that correct assumption?
Correct. Based on what you voted last year at the 14 budget, you use free cash, some free cash to fund budget articles.
Okay, I got it.
And if, using numbers I've given you, you'll go into the annual town meeting with a free cash balance that will provide money for capital improvements like we vote on, and other articles that may come forth that we need to balance out at the end of the year. It'd be a one-time shot that we use that money for.
Okay, I just want to ask about the assumptions.
Yes, sure.
Why don't you come up here?
Michael, were you waiting to be, Sean, and then Michael?
Hi, Sean Oshufeld, I'm on Finance Committee. First of all, yay, I'm really glad to see this. As painful as it is, it's really nice that we're sitting here talking about this in November, and it's painful no matter how you look at it. Steve, you made an assumption that the new net revenue, the 305,000 new net revenue, that would be split up 54-46%, and I'm wondering where that assumption came from.
Okay. I wish I had one of those cameras, just remember that. Just remember one of those cameras, and the microphone fits on the ear. Okay, let me see where I'm at.
Yeah, so there. No, it was on that previous page.
Was it on that previous page? I get lost in these pages sometimes.
She's asking for the breakdown
Oh,
between schools.
okay.
So
and
The way-
the breakup,
the way-
4% and
okay.
46%, why, that was an assumption you made.
No,
Okay.
what I did was, this was the total amount of money that was appropriated at town meeting for the town budget, school and town.
For FY14.
FY14.
Does that include the changes from the town meeting a week ago?
No,
No, okay.
what that did was establish, for the budget purpose that was developed, that 54% of this $32 million went to the school.
So you're looking at the current ratio of town to school is 54-40%, 46 for the
Yeah.
current ratio. So that's
Yes.
just why you assumed that going forward in FY15.
Well, it becomes realistic in that you had $32 million in revenue available to you to use. And the school took 54% of that, and the town took 46% of that. So moving that same percentage forward, say this is the split that we are going to use for the annual town meeting coming up this year for revenues that are available. So the school enjoys 54% of the additional revenue on the
You're assuming the revenue, for the purposes of this exercise, you assumed that you'd go forward with the projected revenue that's at the same ratio that we have now.
Yes.
There's no reason you have to be at that ratio. That's just the assumption that you made when you were putting together the budget.
Well, it becomes a solid assumption because
You could
that's,
put 100% of the new revenue to the town and 0% to the schools or vice versa,
No.
right? So I'm just trying to figure out where that ratio.
it didn't make sense to do that.
I'm not saying it made sense to do
I know,
that. I'm
but
saying
yeah.
that's where you based it on.
That's what I based it on. I explained that earlier on.
Okay.
Because the argument could be that if we really got into it, a lot of this money in this town budget goes to the school. Like I'm just saying, if we really got into the split where it should be, a lot of this money in town budget goes to the school. Unemployment, health insurance,
I'm just,
building-
all I'm
no,
trying to
no,
get at is
yeah.
you projected the ratio
Yeah.
based on the current ratio.
Yes.
And that was the guidance that
Yes.
you're giving to the department heads.
Yes.
That was.
In some past history, I think we've gone up and down. There's been 60-40, 55-45.
I'm not saying it's a bad ratio.
Yeah, so it's just, I think, I didn't object to that when I saw that because it's kind of, some people the town would argue you're giving the schools too much, the schools would argue you're not giving them enough for their cost associated with it.
I didn't want to get into nitpicking,
No,
because
no,
that,
Steve,
that's
sometimes if
usual.
both sides are upset, you've probably done what you should have.
Sometimes I wonder.
And then the school number, you put the regional school money in there for the projecting, but does that
That's
include, we just had a big chunk that we just gave to Diamond again, right? So does that
19,000.
include- Yeah, so does that include
No,
that?
no, because that was in this town meeting.
Okay.
And I recognize in this page here, I recognize that there may be $100,000 more than what I put in the budget for them.
But do you have any basis for that, or you're just projecting?
No, I'm just projecting out because I don't think that a 0.9% increases are gonna fly at the regional school level, okay? And that's something that both the school and the town is gonna have to assimilate in their budget.
Thank you.
Michael, do you have a question?
Is that on that page? Looks like that. Great.
The number of pages next time.
Oh, gee, that's more things I know what to do with.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I come before you as a member of the Westport School Committee, also the chairman of the Budget Subcommittee. And first item on the agenda is to thank Steve. This is not the first time I've seen various presentations, and as he mentioned, it is a moving figure, and it's a work in progress. And certainly, it's almost been a month since I've been absorbing the importance of this dialogue. Steve has visited with the superintendent's office and will continue to, so I make sure I extend that greetings and thanks. A couple of things I did want to mention. In this presentation, we're getting a little bit beyond managing the budget. We're looking at basically policy making. You're making some very strong fiscal policy assumptions, and I just want to point out a couple things I heard. One was the figure that's presented, how the revenue is split up. That is a member of the Finance Committee indicated, very much an assumption, and there's a few items that I'll get into on that. Basically, you're assuming for this year that we'll bundle in our regional technical school budget as what was termed the schools portion. In past years, we've kind of separated that out a bit. So when we see 54%, and we remember 49, 51, that's because the regional budget was someplace else. So it is.
That's not exactly factual. The schools are always separate. The schools cannot, they're independent. And the town side is definite, and the school side is definite. It includes regional schools as part of that.
No, as the educational budget, but not as the schools. And that has been how it's been.
In my tenure in this town, Michael, serving not only on the selectmen and finance committee and so forth, there's the school side and the town side. The school side includes all educational resources, Bristol Aggies, Diamond, and the school's chairman, Willett was chairman of the school, of the selectmen for many years, and I think that's his assumption as well, so we would challenge that question.
I've seen it termed the educational budget with the breakdown of the Westport community schools, and then.
But if you look at the second page, if you look at your second page, Mike,
Yep.
so I have it broken out. The second page you got, go to page 2.
Okay.
You see, down the bottom, I've broken out between Westport schools, the regional schools, and the town.
Right. I just remember from 3 years ago, as we were talking about the Westport Community Schools budget, and it was approximately 49% of the total budget, the regionals hadn't been added into that yet. So in making the assumption that that's where it belongs in this cover presentation, we're looking at that increase from last year on the per student when they came forward, not the recent increase, but last year's annual increase. Is something that we should be, that if it's in the school's budget, we have to be involved in looking at that. That goes through the Board of Selectmen, and it's a great program. I'm not suggesting we're not getting every dollar's worth. But the way that the revenue is split up has been presented differently in the past. We talked about using the analysis and that it is a floating, and there'll be some changes and projections. But, my news to you is that we are working in the superintendent's office. They're working with the administration of each building in each departments, of which there's about 14 departments, to coordinate a similar figure. I'm tracking, just on my analysis, about an $850,000 increase. So I would leave you with the thought of that the school department has to live with the $16 million budget is just not, I think it's beyond what the presentation says. I think if we plugged in, and I don't have an official number to give you, I'm just saying as one member, I've been tracking what we'd be looking at this point, and it's going to go through a full process. But when we have that number, we'll be sharing it with you. But it's certainly premature to issue a number at this early juncture to what the schools would be living with. So I think I think December 15th actually is the deadline that you'd like to get our budget in.
No, the December 15th was my deadline to the Board of Selectmen to present the town budget to them. I realize that the school department operates on a different schedule of how they to present their budget. The reason we start the process early is just for this. You have to set some guidelines, you have to set some benchmarks to hit, and that's the benchmark that I'm going to hit, because that's the policy of the board, that we don't use free cash to get there. You know, between the three budgets in this town, the community schools, the regional schools in the town, we have $300,000. It's not going to go far. There's going to be wrestling to get it, and I've got to make my reductions to meet the number that I've come out to, realizing that as time goes on, the selectmen will be able to, because the revenues are starting to loosen up, maybe the state becomes real magnanimous and throws us all kinds of money, and they can throw some of this stuff back in again as the budget process goes through. But we have to start someplace, and I do not favor waiting until March to start the process. I do not favor waiting until February to start the process. I think the taxpayers in this town need to know that's the revenues, this is the process we're going to go through. And through all these meetings that we have prior to going to town meeting, is really going to help the process out at town meeting. Not saying the FinCom's going to agree with us, okay? But at least we're going to move forward in staying within that Proposition 2.5 number. And then as the reins loosen up, we're able to do something different, and something you guys can do differently. And I realize that, you know, the school departments come in with a high number, and as they go along, it reduces down to a final number. But that's the world that we live in financing these issues for the town.
No, and I perfectly understand, and again, I thank you, and I just share with the Board of Selectmen as we heard that the school department is going to have to live with 16 million, let's keep in mind, we also heard that the whole presentation has some floating numbers in it, and we hope to work with you on creating a shift in what makes sense for the town, so we look forward to it.
Well, let's be clear as a community. There's nothing floating about a structural deficit. That's factual. And there's nothing floating about how we arrived at an operation budget last year. We had $590,000 that wasn't in funds for operations that we used from other sources to fund the operations. Starting this year, nothing has changed except we've carried that forward without the money to support that. In addition, we've added to the problems because there's been negotiated increases for both the schools and the town and various unions and non-union positions. Our operations increased just by fixed costs in a given year where utility costs may increase. All those have to be factored in. So as a community, we either work within the source of funds that are available to us, or we look at other sources of funds that may be able to be applied. And those are one-time funds, but they could be applied to the operations. But at some point, you run out of one-time funds to apply, and that's kind of what we're addressing right now. The community, town of Westport as a community can decide how they want to use one-time funds going forward. As a board policy, we've kind of suggested that we're responsible, we're charged, we're elected to provide some leadership for the community. We're trying to do that. We also have a responsibility to have a balanced budget and submit it to the Finance Committee in a timely fashion. The Finance Committee could accept it, come up with their own proposal. The Finance Committee can recommend something different to town meeting. We can have ours recommended to town meeting. The schools can come up with a third one. Those are all options. And there'll be a lot of discussions on the town side, and you know, maybe you can do away with this department, or you can do this, or you can do that, and the schools will say, well, what happened to the 200 or 120 students that dropped out, not dropped out, but are no longer part of the account in the last 2 years? How is that factored in? You know, all those discussions are going to take place. Some of them are factual, and some of them are kind of assumptions that people are making that the facts are not there to back them up. But at the end of the day, the fact is we're structurally out of balance. And we can continue to be structurally out of balance probably for one more year if the town decides they want to do that. But the penalty at the end of that will even be greater than it is right now. At some point, we have to learn to live within our means, or we have to go the route that some other towns have, and it's bankruptcy as a town.
Thanks for making one clarification to people at home. We were talking before, when we were saying the 46%, that it included the regional schools. That figure, just for people at home, that $16 million and some change, that's strictly for the Westport schools. In addition to that, for the regional school, there's a 1.3 million, and the town is 15 million. So I just want to say that 16 million did not include regional schools, just for people at home.
Melissa?
Melissa Pacheco, School Committee. I just wanted to say thank you again. I think it's important that we all have this open dialogue, so thank you. But I did have just one quick question. The 16 million that's on page 2 for the Westport schools, is that including or not including the 54.5 that's labeled as the Westport school share of increased assessments? Was that?
The 54% is regional and,
No, let me reword my,
okay.
where it says Westport schools, it says the net increase is 150,344. Is that minus 54,000 or that's including? So that's the amount, it's not minus this 54,000?
No, I haven't taken that 54,000 into account.
So that's not including that 54? So are you saying that our budget is going to be increased 100,000?
Yes.
That would be the net versus that one?
I'm anticipating that. Of course, I don't know what the regional school system's gonna come in, maybe less than that. I just didn't plug that figure in.
Okay,
Okay, I took my side of it and applied that percentage to it, not knowing what the regional school system would come in at.
so then
They alone could blow that whole thing apart, and as you all know, and then we another dilemma we have to face.
so then that 16 million is less, it's more like 15? Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on that?
And when I say it's a floating number, yeah, it's not a pie in the sky number that we're dealing with. These were made based on what I feel is some sound business practice, in that projecting revenues forward in a conservative manner, rather than, I could have drawn some real pretty pictures and made us look real good, but the reality of the fact, I gotta be really conservative, and hopefully the numbers come in better than what they do. And what I mean by floating, that we'll be able to adjust our budgets based on what comes in April and in March. And hopefully they voted a budget by that time to the state to let us know where it's gonna come in. But I feel, the only figure that I feel uncertain about, I wanna make that very clear to everybody, is the number for state aid. I don't anticipate any increases in my estimated receipts. So I'm gonna hold firm on that. So the only issue that I'm looking at right now is state aid, the way that may come a change. And that's why I tell people, let's see the cherry sheet and the green sheet. Put that together, see what the net figure comes out to be. So, that's the only issue that I see might change in these numbers.
And that's not to say, as a board, that we can't be aggressive to look at other sources of revenue and operations, if there's some way that we can reduce some operation expense. We got a couple of things on the agenda tonight we'll talk about. As Stephen mentioned, maybe local receipts will come in a bit above what we're hoping, but realistically, we've got to go with what we have in hand right now.
Well, and I got to caution the board, I think that when meeting with the finance officer, we feel pretty strongly about the estimated receipt. I don't think we ought to make those changes.
I would agree, but it's at this point, I think anything's on the table, but we're saying very honestly how much money we have for the operations.
Absolutely.
Other people can decide to kind of raid the cookie jar if you would, but there are not many cookies left in that jar. That's the problem. Okay, if we could, I'd like to go on. I notice we have some folks in the crowd here, and I'll try to keep this next one. It was supposed to be a discussion on developing policies. It's kind of a follow through on some of the things that we're just talking about. And maybe we can have that discussion at the next meeting if you want, but maybe start thinking about ways that we could improve efficiency and reduce operating budget expenses based on what we've heard. I've given some examples on the agenda tonight, but we're short a board member. I would suggest, unless board members want to talk about it, we delay that until the following meeting, but if anybody wants to speak to anything that's on there that I've suggested, we certainly can do that now.
So that's the 25th, Tony?
November 25th is the next meeting? Yes. Just had to look at the calendar.
25th, yeah.
Yep. And that'll be an ongoing, it's going to be an ongoing challenge for us, quite frankly.
I beg your indulgence. I hate mentioning names, I always forget some real important people that help me out a lot. My staff has gone beyond, because I really put them a lot of pressure to get some things done, and especially keep me abreast of my own computer to make sure it works right. And and poor Diane, Denise, I've driven them crazy over the last couple of months and just trying to get this stuff out. And that's why I mentioned the employees. I can't mention everybody to help me out, but the planning board did all that, those copies for me.
Yep.
And that was a big help, because it will show a better presentation. So please forgive me if I forgot anybody, but it wasn't intentional.
Okay, appreciate that. So we'll delay the topic on discussion for efficiencies and reduce operating budget expenses, and maybe all board members could come in with
Yeah, I mean,
suggestions.
I just wanted to know how you tie water into affordable housing, but Craig is here to discuss it, maybe you could discuss, let me know an email why that would be tied in and not with water resources, that's all.
Well, that's actually, the water resources have not been involved with the Affordable Housing Trust, and there's questions for the Board of Health. They have a meeting next week, and there are impacts in that, and that's why that's on there. I think it's overall, it's trying to give some examples. Real briefly, the Veterans Affair, it's, having the Veterans Affairs work closer with the Council on Aging. I think both groups are interested in doing that, and there may be some cost savings in doing that. Certainly, transportation options and those kinds of things, and the same thing with, I think Steve had mentioned when he first came on board in terms of when the mechanic was working in the highway department. There's some ways that the police, and I think the chief has talked to Chris, and so they've come up with some ways that they feel, and brakes and oil changes as possibilities. So I think, if all departments can start thinking about it, there's some ways. Obviously, if we can reduce expenses, we've solved some of this problem, but it's going to have to be an effort that everybody's going to have to participate in, and that's what that was all about. Next thing on is 6:45. We're catching up a little bit here. It's Professor Quinn from the from the UMass Dartmouth Law School. John, why don't you come up? At the last special town meeting, we had a gentleman, Bart Henderson, who taught me just as I was going up to the stage, and volunteered his services as a UMass law student to work with us going forward. And there was another lady as well from the political science area. But John's here tonight to talk a little bit about the interest of the UMass Law School. By the way, I'm a former employee of the University of Massachusetts, Dartmouth. I retired in March. I am no way involved with, outside of just being a neighbor trying to help out the university as any neighbor would. But John is here to speak on behalf of the law school, so I'll turn it over to John.
Thank you very much, Chairman Vieira. And I thought my Board of Selectmen days were behind me, but I'm here in a different capacity. My name's John Quinn. I'm the Director of Public Interest Law at the UMass School of Law, and one of my duties is to build out externships and placements for students. We've got over 300 students and a whole host of things. We've got students really placed all over New England in a variety of different capacities. Just locally, numerous people in the District Attorney's Office, Public Defender's Office, many in the state agencies, a lot in the city of Fall River, a lot in the city of New Bedford. So one of our goals is to reach out into some of the communities and bring some of our very talented students to work on local projects in the community. So at the invitation of Chairman Vieira, I came here tonight. I can give you a little outline of some of the different programs that we have and see if there's certainly, hopefully this is the first of many brainstorming sessions, but we've got 4 or 5 different programs that I think maybe we could collaborate with. Number one, we have what we call a field placement program. Basically, work for credit. You get it, it's the class that I teach, and students are required to do something between 130 to 150 hours in a placement. We've got a class going on right now with 15 students placed all over the place. That's one avenue. One issue with that, it's got to be under the supervision of a lawyer, which may be problematic unless we've worked something out with Kaufman and Page. The second topic that we have is public interest law fellows, and that's what the gentleman, Mr. Henderson, that approached and went to this town meeting the other day. We've got approximately 70 students that are on a fellowship, a public interest fellowship, which I run this program. As part of their scholarship, they've got to do 200 hours of community service during the time that they're enrolled at the law school. You know, approximately 50 or 75 per year for the 3 years. That does not have to be under the supervision of a lawyer. We think that a lot of these things that are quasi-judicial or policy-related certainly are great learning experiences, but doesn't have to have a lawyer involved in it. So that's another area I think that we can collaborate with. The third area of going back to the requirement of overseeing a lawyer, we have a requirement that every student does 30 hours of pro bono work under the supervision of a lawyer in a placement. Again, we have those really all over New England. And then the fourth one that we have is a public interest summer stipend program that through some funds we place students in public interest law placements. They're required to do 30 hours a week for 10 weeks, and they get paid either by the host or through a combination of funds from other sources. So I think those are 4 areas. I think probably the easiest one to do is the public interest law fellow, the not requiring the supervision, but I'd love to, collaborate in all 4 of those areas as we go forward. Like I said, I've been there for a couple of years, and I graduated from law school in 1989, and law school education has changed dramatically now. It's really to be practice ready upon graduation, and the UMass Law School is trying to be right there at the forefront of students in the community working, and we just passed a requirement that every student's got to do this again as a condition of graduation. So we've got a lot of students that I'm trying to shop around for a lot of different placements, and as I said, we've got a bunch of them, and we'd love to get out into the smaller communities and collaborate, which in fact may have the most demand for their services as well.
Questions?
Couple, well, if I could first. John, on the public interest law, could that be something like researching property, like deeds and whatnot? Could that be part of it?
Absolutely, and I think that would probably require the supervision of a lawyer if they're doing a title search. I don't want you don't want a law student signing the title exam, but I think they could. We have students that work in the register of probate and others, but that could be part of their assignment. Yes.
We've got some abandoned property, some property that needs some research. I was just curious.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
So one thing I like about this so far, the public interest law, you don't need a supervision, quote unquote, it's 200 hours, but it's continuing.
Yes.
So next year, we're not starting from scratch. This isn't a one-shot deal. Once it's up and running, and is there a, how could I say, a seamless transition when a person A is kind of finishing off, person B's coming in? Or is it, in other words, he's out the door and we're going to have a lag time of a month and this guy's always starting over? Or is there some type of a seamless transition?
It depends. What I like to say, I'm creating a menu of opportunities for the student. So, I've got a posting that people can select from these placements. What we hope is that a student you get in the first year,
Sure.
like this student that we talked about, he's finishing up the first semester, he lives in Westport, he gets a niche, and he's here for 2.5 or 3 years, and that would be the easiest way for, I advise these students, you're better off having one placement for the whole time rather than chopping it up and breaking up, and it's good for the student as well as the host.
John, I should tell you, his last 2 years was in Hawaii, and he came in this afternoon to see us, but I think he might have second thoughts about living in New England when he saw the snow fly today. So we're hoping he'll still stay with us. But the fellowship also works out. He was explaining to us that he gets a reduction in his tuition by participating in this program. So there's an advantage for him to do this and work with the town. And as Steve was asking about one area, I mean, the board could identify a number of areas. We pay a little over $100,000 a year presently. There was times that we paid almost $200,000 for legal services. Our hope is to try to reduce that budget, and that's why when he came up to town meeting and asked if there were some things that we thought he might be able to get involved in, I wanted to bring it before the board.
Yeah, no, that's great, and he's a class example. There's some amazing students up there. He probably told you he's from Hawaii. He spent this past summer working in the U.S. Senate for the U.S. Senator from Hawaii, and shows up here, and he's a big part of the first year class there. Which leads me to my other topic, unrelated to this, but the same students involved. We, one of the things I'm working with some of the students is on the Roberts Rules of Order, and we put on a presentation about a month or two ago for a whole host of local nonprofits, and we were kind of the actors of one of the student groups. We did the invitation, but we had a packed house up there, and it went over very, very well. And we had a lot of, some community members said, hey, why don't you bring this to our town hall and, maybe train some of the boards, certainly you guys are talented and skilled and know the rules, but oftentimes you get the part-time boards that really are not unfamiliar, but uncomfortable oftentimes with some of the jargon. So we hope after the first of the year to take this show on the road and go to some of the towns and make presentations, where we're invited. And it went very well, like I said, and actually, like I said, the same students involved. So maybe we'll get back to you after the first of the year on that one as well.
And I'm also president of Bristol County Selectors Association, so you might want to have a meeting, you can go to the talk.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Steve? I'm sorry. Robert Michael.
John, did I pick up that you did time as a selectman?
Even worse, the state legislature.
Okay, so then, I guess my question is, you know the drill, and maybe you've got some ideas about how we could use these services. I just thought of one thing, but I mean, I'm curious, you might have a better perspective.
Yeah, we've got students doing a whole host of things, we've got, a lot of policy things, students do research, you may have, I just listened to the presentation on the APR, and that, that's an area that we've got. I just placed 2 students out at Bristol Aggie working on some of the policies out there. So really, there's some very sharp students there. And I think where you've got a need, we can try and structure something for them to work on. Like I said, we've got policy students. I've got a bunch of students up at the State House as well, working kind of as legislative aides, drafting legislation and doing constituent services. So as the school grows, we're going to have a lot of students to place, and so it's an exciting thing, and I think it's good that they can really, whatever your needs are, I think we can tailor something for.
Well, the one thing that I thought of is something that I've been a little bit frustrated trying to obtain is we've spent, as Tony said, $100,000 to $200,000. I don't think that includes settlements, Tony. Does that? That's settlements?
Well, that's just year to year.
Plus settlements.
Yeah.
And I would love to see an analysis, time-based analysis on how we spend our money, in what areas within the town, and what trends should we be looking to try to have an impact on.
Yeah, I think that's certainly something they could do. We've got a regular standing relationship with the New Bedford City Solicitor's Office. We've got students there working on stuff, so I know you've got outside counsel, not in-house, but I'm sure we could work something out with them.
Do we need more details, or can we, you think it's premature to take a vote to lock in that student, and we could start working on some of that stuff?
Well, certainly, I think we could lock in at least parts of it and going forward and give, I assume you're going to talk to the dean of the law school, and there may be we probably want to look at what contracts we would be signing as a board and that kind of deal.
Well,
but in principle, I think we can certainly say we're supportive if we are.
Yeah, one thing we've done, not, I think, with the town yet, but is enter into a generic MOU.
Sure.
To, that will provide interns and, kind of a generic thing, so if anybody ever said, what's the relationship, it's on paper. So we just entered into one with HUD and with the DA's office, Norfolk DA's, and we've got a regular standing, so that might be a way to kind of, and I will draft the MOU free of charge, no legal fees involved. And
having a state rep draft something, the next state rep could be dangerous.
All right, I move we support the principal, especially that student, is it Henderson?
Bot Henderson.
All right, Henderson, that approaches town meeting. I move a principle that we move forward working with Bart Henderson on legal matters through John Quinn after we get the paper.
And possibly expand that to other options.
Yeah, absolutely. It's
Come
just
under
a touch
the
base that we'd like him, try to lock him in before he goes to something else. That's a motion.
Second.
obviously we work on a punch
Sure.
list and whatnot.
Any other?
I just want one question. And I'm just interested in one that can work without other lawyers, and like you say,
That's number 2 in the one.
right,
Yeah.
the public interest law.
Yep.
So in other words, that individual, for instance, okay, this is a statute law, but he can do it on his own and do a lot of the research, go through all the case law, and so that he can kind of do on his own,
Yeah.
kind of do presenting.
Let me tell you one thing that I had in mind right away when I first met him last Wednesday. We were in a delegate negotiation with a fine from DEP, on the Department of Environmental Affairs, on putting up a water treatment plant. We're also working with the city of Fall River in a delicate situation because we get the water from them, and we think that's part of the problem. It might be helpful to bring somebody in from the outside to work with these agencies as we go through the negotiations. And he would be working as a fellow, but he could be working with Copeland and Page to some degree. So instead of having somebody from Copeland and Page participate in some of that, some of it's kind of contract negotiation, we could have a resource with us when Jack or myself or board members are involved in these negotiations.
Absolutely. That's exactly the type of opportunities we're
There's
looking
only
for.
Do we just have one, or sometimes it would be two, that could work for the town?
Yeah, I think, one thing we could do maybe is if we drafted up a paragraph of what kind of, not specific projects, but kind of to do research, policy,
With a
analysis.
memo or understanding, I mean, a year from now, the Board of Selectmen may decide they've got another preference. Or
Right.
I see, planning boards out there, a finance committee, whatever. It might be something that we could adjust as
Yeah,
time
absolutely.
presents
I
itself.
think it's a great idea, there's no question about it. I'm trying to get more bang for the buck, that's a great idea.
Oh, yeah, and just some properties and stuff.
Got a motion on the floor in a second. Any other questions? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. We'll be in touch. Okay, very good, yeah.
Okay, next item on the agenda had to do with long-term planning and town building committee. And basically, we weren't sure at this point if the schools, and I guess they haven't heard back, Michael or Melissa, I see from the schools, I don't know if, is there anybody else from the schools here? Michael or Melissa? We know that you people have put in a request for building needs and potential additions or particular requests, and we weren't sure at that point. There was some discussion that first part of November people would hear, and there was discussion that they probably would hear prior to the convention that the School Committee Association had, and I guess that hasn't happened yet. So one of the concerns we have, at least I have going forward as a member of this board, is to do a review of town buildings as well as schools. We have the same responsibility in terms of the number of buildings we have, the costs associated with them. If there's some way that the town could exist and move forward over the next 5 years with less buildings, there might be a cost savings associated with that. And if there isn't, we not only know that we have some cost to maintain those present buildings, but we are looking at, I think there's some requests tonight for police roof repairs and a potential addition that they're looking at. Council on Aging has requests for their building, and down the road at some point, there's discussion in terms of additional cost associated with those two buildings. So we need to look at, as a board, what we're responsible for on our side. At the same time, if we can do it as a community with the schools included, there may be some advantages in cost savings if we look at if buildings do come available on the school side, maybe how we could utilize them as a town as well. And the bottom line is we cut down expenses that we can have in the operations for other efficiencies that might be identified. So that's what that was about. But I don't think we can expect our present town building committee to take on that responsibility. They're actually reviewing individual buildings. And I would suggest that we think about, not necessarily tonight if the board doesn't have an appetite, but really soon, we ought to talk about establishing some kind of a committee, maybe waiting until the schools have a better clarity in terms of some of their needs, and sitting down with town, maybe a member of the board, certainly the people from the town building committee, but a few other folks that could talk about conditions of buildings, but also needs and projections going forward for use. I don't think that the present model is going to work for either side personally, but that's my bias. Thoughts, comments on that?
I agree. I think it would be good if we could put a committee together that looked at needs and assets. I don't know if you want to actually try to pull that together tonight, or do you want to make a specific proposal?
All right, okay, welcome. One of the things, I was the one that established that long-term planning town committee, and it was with Bill Gifford, Robert Bello, and then we ended up going with Ed Brum. And all the specialties that they had, one of the things we had a hard time getting an architect, so that's still in the bank. And what we wanted that group to do is go to different, like you're doing your own home, okay? This building's gonna need a roof now. This other building will need a roof within 5 years. So it gives us a capital improvement to start planning. Or this sidewalk's broken up, or this is gonna need shingles. This is gonna, give us an idea. We only find out what's wrong when the roof collapses, the windows fall out, and say, oh, if we would only known, preventive maintenance is far more cost effective than doing this whole replacement. And that was the intent of putting this long-term planning agreement. We didn't need a 50-man committee. They can tell us, it's gonna come back to the board, and they're just making a suggestion back to the board of selectmen, saying, look, we checked out these 3 buildings, this is really an issue. This should go out to bid. And we're fortunate that we have people on there who could write up the RFP, who could, if there's something that was gonna come out of, the money that was gonna come out of, CPC, coming out of CPC, they would present it for, after coming to get approval from the Board of Selectmen, said, yeah, that's a great idea. They would take it, they would follow through, they would go to CPC, here's what it's gonna cost and all that. And almost be the clerk of the works to get it through when the bids go out. So it's still be the total control of the board, but they're doing the legwork. You know, Bill has been involved, been involved in all types and all his life in engineering and watching the construction, clerk of the works and all that, we're fortunate to have him. Ed does all major roofs, all major institutions all around New England, troubleshooter for a company out of Chicago. So, I mean, so we get some expertise there that we can't pay for that stuff. So they're saying we gotta do it, and I like to say we just gotta make sure we charge them, and whatever's gonna be going for any building in a town that's gonna be repaired, whoever had some idea of doing something, it's gotta work through that committee, it's gotta go down and sit with them. And they're almost our thing, almost like the water resource man. They're our eyes and ears, they're putting it together and presenting it to us, so.
This should not be interpreted, though, as the town building committee to do an assessment of the buildings. I mean, you're certainly welcome as a board to do that. What I'm suggesting, and why I put this on, was that I think we need to look the same way members of this board sometimes look at the schools and say, well, they got more buildings than they need based on their population. I think we should start with us first. We should see, do we have more buildings than we need for our operations? And is it sustainable, the number of buildings that we have in our operations? Could we do it more efficiently going forward? And if the school's looking at that at the same time, doesn't it make sense before we make those decisions independently of one another, that we sit down as a group and try to see if there's something that works in the betterment of the taxpayers in the long run? And I would suggest, in my opinion, just one member of this committee, or this board, that I think we need to tighten our belt on both sides, the town and the schools, and I do think that this is eventually is going to either be about people and layoffs, or it's going to be about a combination of things, and that combination of things could be drastically impacted if you start looking at the operations and maintenance of the buildings that are involved. And we have some buildings that we may have some valid use, but they wouldn't be under the operations of the town and the taxpayers. And from my bias, I would suggest that we start looking at that before we start looking at cutting back on staff. That should be at least something that we are comfortable as a community with on the school side and the town side.
Yeah, but once, if we put an extra people on that, and the people that we put on there, and once they were determined, said, we don't know about this building here, we're on the fence, should we get rid of building A? And this committee goes out and looks at that and said, yeah, I'd get rid of it, because boy, it's gonna cost you another $500,000 just to update it, and it's not really that important. And again, it's just another check and balance, but I agree, it's a little bit different, but that's something you probably got.
So Tony, what you're talking about is a group that would
The needs.
move the pieces around in the future about who will be in what building and how we will utilize those buildings. And they may have to work hand in glove with the existing building committee as to the detail of what those buildings need. But you're still talking about a group that needs to look down the road and take the assets, which are the buildings, and the departments representing the needs, and try to shuffle those into the most cost-effective long-term plan.
What I'm talking about is not popular within the community on the school side or the town side, but realistically, I think it's something we have to face, and we may have more buildings than we need, and I understand when I say that, that raises, the concern of people who have a dog in a race, so to speak, whether it's the school side or the town side, but I think that if we look at maintaining the buildings, the costs associated with them, we all can do that, and we do that when we look at budgets. That's nice to have, they're good, there's nothing to say it's a luxury, but is it doable in the operation budget? If somebody wants to go and look at overrides and so forth for operations, fine, but there's only so much money to go around, and if we're maintaining the buildings as we are, for the capacity that we're using them on both sides, I'm speaking of the town, not the school necessarily, but I think the school is addressing the same situation. That's why they've done this research with school building assistants. If we end up where we've freed up some buildings and we combine resources for those buildings, there's all kinds of, people could decide who goes where, how that works best as a community, but I do think we ought to start looking at that. Otherwise, I think if we're going to maintain what we're maintaining, it's sort of like having a house that you've outgrown to some degree. And I think you have to look at it not only today, but I think you need to look at it 5 years down the road. And if you're going to do something today that's going to have an adverse effect 5 years down the road, I would suggest we don't do that. But I do think that there's some history there on both sides, the school side and the town side, that's worthy of having at least a committee assigned to that a little closer.
I agree.
I want to recognize Bill from the building.
I just wanted to make one comment, if you can hear me. It almost looks to me as though you're talking about two different committees. I just wanted to try to give you my insight.
We are. Very
First of all, we talked about the long-term planning committee. All right, now, I, for instance, along with others, have been through every single building in town. I've handed in some written recommendations. I went through the entire school department with the head of maintenance, and we talked about things like, well, wait a minute, the high school. I've heard rumors that they're talking about putting an addition onto the high school. What about the well situation? Now, the well situation, we didn't know whether we had two bad wells or not. We fracked one inside, we found it worked fairly well, so then we started to put in a whole new tank system, if you remember. And we had pumps in there because we just couldn't get the amount of water up that we needed. Now, the reason that I mention that we have those kinds of problems in other buildings in town too. Before you go out with a second committee, which you're talking about, of can we combine buildings and so on, that second committee needs information from the first committee, which is gathered from maintenance people, custodians, and people that are on boards and so on. They can tell you, you've heard the roof needs to be replaced in a certain building. Well, maybe it's just a piece of the gutter, and somebody said the roof instead. So you need that information so that when we're talking about a particular building, you've got good information to work with. So you're kind of talking about, it could be one committee, or maybe two committees, and one committee has information that they've gathered throughout the town, which is this the long-term planning committee, which has led to a lot of things that have been done. I mean, each one of the buildings has had a lot of things done to it. And that committee can give information to another committee that might be saying, hey, let's take building A and building B, combine them together, knock this one down, move this one, whatever the case may be. That's just my thought.
And I support, like I know what you're trying to do, Tony, I agree with it, but I think this long-term planning committee has to be part of that committee as well.
No, that was my thoughts on it.
No, I think it's great.
What's the pleasure of the committee? Do you want to do something now, or you want to delay this to another meeting?
What is the makeup?
Oh, well, that's what you'd want to talk about if you want to make it, and what you think it should be. My suggestion was that we take, it's just a 3-member building committee now, take those 3 members and add 3 or 4 more people that would be representative of both sides, schools and the town, and start addressing some of this and look at this. I mean, it's going to go, you're going to have public hearings, you're going to have town meetings, there'll be recommendations, but I think we should, as a community, start talking about this. We're going to, at some point, we listen to presentations that something's going to happen, not tomorrow, but certainly in the next few years on the school side, and it's going to be costly. We don't know what the figures are. We've heard anywhere from 16 million to 38 million. It could be something totally different from that. But there's going to be something that addressed on the school side. And we know what the population is on the school side. And we know what the population is with our community. And what our responsibilities are as a community. And it's just, if there's a way that we can do this with putting people under a different roof and maybe doing it more efficiently and some cost savings, why not? And save some bodies in the process and being more efficient.
Tony, I think we should move ahead, but I'm going to suggest that maybe the next meeting, you or somebody else flesh, or put a specific recommendation, because I think we do need to either augment the capabilities of and the responsibilities of the current committee, or come up with another committee, they work together somehow. But we should move ahead, and we should.
Right, maybe we could do is make two committees, we have this long-term, and then have them work together as a hybrid, but they still maintain their independence.
Sure, but I mean, we should start with some suggestions on who,
Who
not
do you think-
not
who do
necessarily
we need-
individuals, but
who do you think we need
where would
on
these
that
people
board?
come from, and I'm agreeing with you.
No, I think most definitely we get too many buildings, I agree.
Any thoughts on the committee?
No, actually, you hear that we need more committees, I mean, more buildings, so, well, you tell me. So,
You know,
I mean,
Steve,
So-
it may come up that this committee decides, we don't have enough buildings. That's okay. But, I'm just telling, I told you it was a bias that I had.
Yeah.
We only have so much money in operations. We heard about it tonight.
Yep.
And I do think, let's give you one fast analogy. The schools come back and they're not going to use the middle school for whatever reason. And now, does that revert back to the town at some point if they're not going to use it? It could. If it reverts back to the town or part of it, one floor. Now, how do we utilize that? If you take the town hall annex and you take this building, maybe you combine the town hall down at the middle school. Or maybe you take the town hall annex and close that and the people in the annex go there and the police department go there. I mean, other people can decide how that's divided up. I probably offended enough people now. And I haven't even talked about the Council on Aging. You take the Council on Aging building and you can close it and turn around and sell it or rent it out or lease it.
There you go.
Yeah, and I've had discussions with Bill, who's on the Friends of the Council on Aging, and told him, I mean, you gotta look at the operation side of it. And the schools are doing the same, but I don't think it's fair for us to say, well, the schools have dropped, 115 students in the last 2 years, and they should be looking at this, and they were high at 2,700, and now they're 1,600, and they should look at their building needs without the town doing the same.
Yeah, I would suggest we bring it next meeting with the makeup. Could I just ask one general question of the schools? Are you folks looking at the changing from the high school to the middle school because the high school kids can be in there? Is that any possibility? Is anybody looking at that?
Middle school up to the high school?
Yeah, reverse it, because high school can be in there.
That is reflected in the statement of interest that I believe will be expiring this month. And as we approach that going forward, we look forward to input from the whole community. We might have to tweak it, but certainly.
I was just curious if it was on the table, because that'd be a good example, but, okay. So next meeting, if you want to present a breakdown.
I just, in response to that, what we've come to learn is that although there's occupancy numbers associated with the building, there's a number that's called an educational capacity. And due to the changes in the way education is delivered, there's less bodies in that figure. So we have to look at those. And this is where we're taking it.
Just before we knock it down, I think we look at that.
Yeah, I think the schools are, they made a presentation to us looking at all kinds of, I don't think they ever
I
talked
never got an
about
answer
it.
to that, yeah.
I don't think they ever publicly talked about that, but they may look at it privately.
All right.
Are you saying, Steve, moving from the high school students?
Swapping.
To the
Swapping
middle
schools.
We've
Just-
never.
That's what I'm asking, yeah.
Yeah, no.
No, he's talking swapping back.
Reverse, because the older ages meet the guidelines for the THBs.
I don't know if they do.
I never heard that suggestion, but it's certainly
I've
something.
been in several times
Yeah.
meetings, I'm
Yeah.
just curious. All right.
Yeah. Okay, anything else on it? So let me understand this. You're asking me to kind of come up with a suggestion for next meeting?
Well, do we even have a breakdown report? I don't remember a report, for these guys to even start digging into the long term on the current buildings. I know Bill has done it through the chair. Bill, is there a report, a compilation of all the schools yet? Like a book of everything going on?
Not a book
No.
or everything going on.
Well, you know what I mean.
Yeah, I don't think they've
You
written
know,
that.
we've had two big studies done, all the way back to the stall study, which went
Right.
through the entire building,
I'm-
25 years ago or something like
Right.
that. And there have been others since then. And also, I have been through all of the buildings. I went through with the head of maintenance.
No, I got you. I just wanted to know.
I gave them all to Jack. I'm just saying that, so we have looked at all of these different things.
Yep.
And some of the problems we run into, that's why I said to Tony, please don't make me come and give reports, because a lot of things sound negative. For instance, as soon as I entered into the high school, right away I was called on by the handicapped people, make sure now here's the list, and I got a thing that's about this thick that talks about what needs to be done in the high school. Put the bubblers out in the corridors, we go on and on and on. And by the time I get through talking, you're gonna
Okay,
say,
Bill,
if I could-
don't hit with the gavel, Tony.
My,
I know what
Folks,
my suggestion,
All right?
just very briefly, Mr. Chair.
folks,
Yeah, all right, well, my idea was to have a student or somebody help compile it.
folks, at this point, I think we need to all take a breath and look again at the fact that we're in a structural deficit. We can strategize all day and night, but the bottom line is the mortgage is still going to be due next month. You can take the money out of savings, and you got a little bit of money in savings, you probably do it for one more year, but the mortgage is due every month. And once you run out of savings, you have to figure out, do you close the rooms? Do you vacate the house? What do you do? That's about, as general as I can, describe the situation that the town's in. We're not alone. Many cities and towns are in this situation, and they have to deal with it in different ways, different strategies. Many have already done that. They've had tremendous layoffs in many cities and towns. We have chose not to do that. At some point, you can only, use a farmer analogy, eat the seed corn so many times, and then you don't plant corn. So I don't know how else to explain it. There's valid issues. We can debate this for the rest of the night, and there's valid issues, and people would argue we don't have enough space, whatever, but you still have to pay the bill. And unless somebody wants to come up with an override to cover these costs, we don't have the money to pay the bill. On the
I don't know what
present
that's
set.
got to do with the question of the breakdown.
It's the buildings. It's the arguments in terms associated with the buildings, okay? So I'll take this charge to try to come up with some suggestions for the next meeting. Next, we have folks from the head of Westport, the Westport Community Village meeting on safety and business challenges, and we were going to have our public safety officer make a presentation. We just received that in our packets this evening, though, and it's on a parking and public safety. If I can find it, I'll at least read from it.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, okay. It's here someplace. Officer Bell has done some research in the head based on some of the concerns from some of the neighbors, and we've talked as a community about trying to respond to, and we have some people from head of Westport here. Most recently, this came up again with the Landing Commission. The last meeting, Steve, they were before us on expanding the lease arrangement in a number of years. The watershed is interested in moving in there. There's been some success down there with the kayak shop. Success has led to additional parking areas. There's been some accidents, in particular on Sundays with the activity with the kayak shop and the church. The pastor of the church, I think at this point, I'm assuming has talked to the safety officer. I know I talked to the pastor yesterday and asked if he would do that. But the safety officer has come up with a list of recommendations in terms of signage, parking on one side of the street. He mentions that in the last 6 days, he did a count for vehicles, and there were 26,005 vehicles traveling through that area. Pretty dramatic. He also did a speed listing down there. The posted is 25 miles an hour. And although the posted was 25 miles an hour, they do a tolerance of 10 miles. So the enforcement limit is 36 miles and above. And 41% of the cars were rated higher than that when they were driving through that area. So I think it's a legitimate complaint and concern for neighbors in terms of, as we move forward and we see this kind of growth going on, how do we manage that? There's a whole list, and I think probably the best way to do that, where the safety officer isn't here tonight, is we could probably make this public. I didn't want to do that. I mean, I think we've got it, what time, maybe 5 o'clock this evening in the packets. And would Officer Bell not here, or again, or he was planning on coming, maybe what we could do is we could make his recommendations public to folks that are here. They could take a copy with them this evening, they can see that, and they could have some discussion with Officer Bell as well. I think from our standpoint, from the town, I see the town planner here and a member of the planning board. I think there's some interest for the residents in terms of moving forward, and what the addition of another neighbor being down there in the garage is going to impact, and some of the abutters, rights of way, landing commission, leases, those kinds of things. And the landing commission needs to weigh on this. I've put in a couple of calls and an email to the chair of the landing commissioner, and haven't heard back from him. I'm assuming that he's going to have some discussion, if he hasn't, with folks in the neighborhood that have raised those questions. But I think the reason it's before us is because some people have put in a request to say, will the town get involved in this process, and will the neighborhood have an opportunity to participate in the vision and going forward in terms of the head of Westport as the growth takes place from an economic development standpoint, and from a community standpoint, a public safety standpoint, how are we going to address these things? And again, the report does suggest some no parking on one side. I think he's, let's get down here, the south side of the road, I guess, for Old County Road, from Turf Road to Pine Hill Road, a no parking sign. I think Officer Bell is certainly open to listen to interests and concerns of the neighbors, but as it relates to the Landing Commission, I think our position is this is something that the Landing Commission has some responsibility for their piece, and they, by doing some lease with the watershed, or attempting to negotiate a lease, if that does happen, I think that's going to be a concern, at least initially, in terms of the impact of that as it relates to the neighbors. I know there's some folks here that have asked me about that and have called and emailed, and I want to give anybody an opportunity to state any concerns or interest they would have on this. I apologize, Officer Bell, up until 3 hours ago, was attending, and I think there's a family emergency that came up that prevented.
Death of the family.
Oh, it's a death in the family, I didn't even know that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can I just mention a couple of things on
Sure.
One of the things he went through, without getting into all of the issues, and we sat down, we talked to him, actually yesterday when I talked to him, went over this a bit, especially around the store, the head of Westport. Definitely put the, like we over here have on Main Road, put the cones in the middle of the street permanently there. Increase the crosswalks, at least 2 crosswalks. The stop sign, for instance, at Reed Road and Old County Road, change the stop sign so it's more, you can see it better, and put it in the street. Further up, another crosswalk there on Gifford Road, and a lot more signage and a lot more enforcement. And also look and see if we get some money to get a radar like we have coming down Main Road. Jet speed is going 30 miles an hour versus 40 miles an hour, stuff like doing that, we're getting 2 of those. Increase all the signage over there. Limited time zone on the north side of Old County Road, especially like where the head store is. Say maybe from Gifford Road up to a little bit beyond, say Reed Road. There's X number of parking spots there, and that would be time zoned out. In other words, 15 minutes parking. So nobody's gonna go there and park and spend 8 hours just park this car there. And it makes it difficult for those who probably want to go into the store, where people just running in and out of stores, so we have a business that we have to deal with. So put that type of signage inside there. So there's a lot of positive type things that they want to do there. And again, we agree 100%, yeah, that's, we think it's a great idea. It's going in the right direction. For 2 crosswalks, we have one day just on the edge of the river, basically just west of the store, and maybe put another one just before we get to Reed Road, I'll put another crosswalk over there. So again, and I think one of the things that's going to be slowing up the traffic is signage in the street and putting those cones in there, slow down. So we're doing everything that we can. And again, as it's a work in progress, and like you were saying, we'll take any how can I say, suggestions from people who live there and say, you know, did you think of this? Did you think of that? Yes, we did. One of the issues we don't is very narrow there. And especially when the church services is going on, you get cars on both sides of the road. And again, I think we reached out to the pastor over there. Let's see how can we work out something. We have something. We gave a suggestion. He said that's a good idea. I think we'll make it work. I said, well, let's try. So I don't want to put it out right now what we're talking about that. But if we can eliminate parking on the south side and make it so much easier instead of people running in between there, this way you only get one row of cars going by, especially when they're parking on both sides. So it's a tough area congested-wise, especially if you're going at a high rate of speed. So that's what we're working out, and we are moving forward with that. One thing I would like to see before if we can, some painting before the cold weather sets in. Maybe not tonight, because tomorrow's gonna be cold. But we can get some painting in, some of the stop sign, change a few, and started going, and that'd probably be one of the main things we would get before April when it starts up again, so. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, I would suggest too, I think there's a working committee for the planning board tomorrow evening. They probably have their agenda set, but periodically they would have such time set aside for that. The town planner is available, you might want to talk, I mean, it's not necessarily a planning board issue per se, but they might be able to give you some guidance on some of the things that they've worked on in the past. So it's a community deal. I think the one thing I've found is that in all discussions, there seems to be a united interest in trying to improve the safety issues and try to work with neighbors and really kind of be respectful of neighbors and the businesses that are down there and try to help everybody be successful. The good news is it's been very successful, and that's what's caused the parking problem. The bad news is that parking problem has to be addressed. Any accidents that occur down there have to be addressed as well. So if it's no parking but for particular times, and those particular times there's a high rate of accidents that occur, even though some of them are relatively minor, but there are accidents there, there's always a safety issue with that. So I think the chief of police and the public safety officer both have spent a lot of time on this and trying to come up with some recommendations, a number of them, and you'll see the list there, that they think could solve that problem. I don't think as a board we necessarily have to vote on the recommendations at this point. I'd rather have John present them to us.
No, but what I'm suggesting is we do an onsite on our off week. If we can meet with everybody there, we can get the papers to do a story, at least a little public awareness, that'll help. I mean, I think the neighborhood knows the Board of Selectmen have been behind you on a lot of things. Back when we had a problem with the sand trucks, parked on the road, flying through there, then we had a problem with the Y going the wrong way, so we keep chipping away. But I'd like to see an onsite with the whole board there. You can look at the problems, get the press there, and do a little story on it, probably help you, at least to raise awareness.
I think
to get everyone on board working together, because we've had a similar experience.
you might want to use the mic. I don't think people can.
People at home can't hear you, so we get the nasty grins.
Just introduce yourself to the Mrs. Riley, but
Hi, yeah, I'm Christy Fromm. I live down at the head with my neighbors here, and mostly we'd welcome any meeting of people coming down, being on the site to see it, talk to us, and help think about a broader plan, because it's difficult getting people to respond, and you've been very responsive, and we're very grateful. Thank you.
Well, I need to, in full disclosure, we're not the final decision maker in some of these areas.
I realize
Let
that.
the town, the landing commission is responsible for the landing. We certainly can talk to them in terms of, access to property and those kinds of situations. And I think that the good news is that everybody that we've talked to, whether it be the watershed or individual businesses down there, have been sensitive to how their business may impact somebody else and trying to work collectively with it. So I think the big piece is the landing commission, based on some of the folks there. I think from what I'm hearing from what you people have said is we need to make sure, and I'm saying this for your benefit, Steve, we need to make sure that the landing commission has a discussion with them and just see if they can work some things out.
That's where I'm headed. If we can include the landing commission and get them to respond and attend, that'd be great. Thanks.
And I can understand their frustration with that. I've experienced that in the last week myself, so I can understand.
But one of the things, that we got to John Bell's report, he's right now just basically dealing with the traffic issues. He's not dealing with the landing commission. There's you got two fronts going here. We're talking right now, this is going, far as we're concerned, this is going forward, this is their recommendation. Instead of working with the highway department, we'll move forward on the traffic layout, putting up different type of signs, slow down, thickly set, or whatever they're gonna handle all that. That's moving forward.
Yeah.
There's another issue to talk about.
In addition to those two groups, we also have Economic Development Task Force, we have the Planning Board. There are some use issues that get into zoning pieces, but there's an opportunity, I think, in terms of parking, that maybe the town could look at, members from the school, you could look at maybe parking at the middle school and utilizing the sidewalks, parking at the Council on Aging and utilizing the sidewalks, and maybe take some of the pressure off parking. Yes, yeah, that's another one, the sand and gravel place. So there are some, but that we can control. I mean, we can't control sand and gravel necessarily, but we certainly can control the school and Council on Aging in terms of availability for parking. And, you know, I mean, you can bring a kayak down to the water and take the vehicle back up or something, and you don't necessarily have to park it right at the water site. So I think, you know, you folks need to sit down with people, various groups, and try to see, and we need to help you do that as much as we can. So, yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Sasha Sullivan. I live at the Head, next door to the store. So I think one of the things we've talked about in different neighborhood meetings, it's not been completely inclusive. I think we need to open this up in terms of more neighbors at the Head, is number one. And I think our reasons for coming here are really based on hearing the Landing Commission and their arrangement with the Watershed Alliance, that there's really limited parking there at the Head. And because it is a landing, there's a requirement. It's not a regulated landing like other landings in town. It's got a federal relationship that doesn't require you be a town resident to park there. So there's landing issues, but what happens from that is that people from all around the community park there, and everyone else has to park somewhere else. And with the new arrangement with the Watershed Alliance, there will be a limited amount of parking there, and it'll be much more watched and understood who gets to park and who doesn't get to park there, because there hasn't been an issue now with the garage kind of going by the wayside. That hasn't, that legacy hasn't, really been there before in the last at least 10, 15 years. So really what's going to happen is all those parking issues are going to start to spread out in the Head. You know, and I think the speed issue and the parking are really critical issues. My husband and I bought the house 11 years ago. Probably 9 years ago, I was out watering hedges that were, knee-high and now are taller than I am. But a car came down and one person was banging a Yui and another came, and they came right at me. I mean, they were literally 10 feet from hitting me. And I just stood there stunned. But that's not an uncommon occurrence that people do bang a U-turn down there. And I think that's going to have to be addressed, and I don't know if that's in the report.
It is.
But I think that's another issue about U-turning. I have seen other locations in Westport on 177. There's a chimney place that says no U-turns. I mean, I know that's private, but I think that might be something to consider because of the speed, the narrowness of the road, and the parking issue. But I think that's why we're here. It's not so much the landing issue as the fact that the landing is going to get a little bit more squeezed and it's going to come out, and the popularity of the Head, which is a beautiful place and we want to keep it beautiful.
Yeah. I think those are all valid concerns, and the police department and public safety have been looking at this probably for about 6 weeks to 2 months now, and because of related accidents and concerns from neighbors. But it's also a real issue as it relates to access. If you are abut that property and landing, you need to have access to your property, and some people have asked about that as well, and I think that's a legitimate issue for them. I mean, it's very difficult if you can't access your own property, and there's a history of how that was done. I'm old enough to remember some of that history, and one way in, one way out with different points, and having different colored shells to identify the driveway in, and then having another drive which was a way out for the town landing. I mean, that, because it was done in the past doesn't mean that's the way you have to go in the future, but there ought to be ways that we can resolve this. And the sooner the better for the people that are associated with that. The proposal is something that we can act on now, but we haven't had a chance to look at it except for tonight. Typically, we allow the public safety people to come up with recommendations, and if we've got some issues, we would address them with the officer, and we're going to give you folks an opportunity to see the report, and at the next meeting, we'll give you an opportunity to see the report. The next meeting, you could do the same, so you could have some input directly with Officer Bell, or come before the meeting, and hopefully we'll have this on the agenda, Diane, for next time, and try to support recommendations or a plan for public safety that would take place immediately. I don't think, I mean, there's some issues that will be effective next spring, certainly, but there's some issues now that I think we need to address, from speed, We need a parking in particular times of the week, so.
We usually always take the recommendation of the police department when they go out and they do a site inspection. And all the stuff I read tonight, when I got here, I mean, there's nothing here that's critical. Replace the reduced speed sign ahead, put a new version of it. Replace and relocate the 25 mile per hour speed limit sign, put a new reflective speed limit sign, and place it 2 feet from the edge of the road. I mean, there's a lot of stuff here that's already in place, but we're just updating it with new state-of-the-art type signage. The only, basically the newest one coming out is going to install parking signs on County Road, basically by the store, with a 15-minute parking zone. But all the rest of the stuff is just updating, cleaning up, repainting the roadway. I'd make a motion that we move forward on this on recommendation of Lieutenant Bell's recommendation. And again, it's not all inclusive. There may be some other stuff that they say, look, we would like to see this. Okay, if it's something that's feasible, we can do it. We're going to try and get the speed limit, the radar stuff. That's funding. That's but I'm talking about the basic core stuff. So I'd make a motion for that.
Dick, your law enforcement background allows you to quickly scan over this and come to that conclusion. I haven't even read it because we just got it tonight, and I'm sure it's all 100%.
No, but okay. That's okay. We can wait 2 more weeks.
I would prefer to wait, just so, in fact, we can solicit some feedback on it and do a better job of digesting it, that's all.
Michael, perhaps you can meet with me and we'll meet with the neighbors down there, do the on-site that I want.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind.
So, go down there.
I'd love to.
Yeah, I'm not trying to downplay that at all. I mean,
No, I want to do the on-site.
Yeah.
I mean, on the
I
other
think
hand,
that's,
if
you know,
you felt like we should move ahead tonight, I mean, I'm sure there's nothing here that's,
No, I mean, we
a
can
problem,
meet with John, we can go over things, that's all.
yeah.
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 Yeah, why don't, if we can, Michael and Steve do that with Officer Bell and do an on-site.
Yeah, they can make their own arrangements
you know.
when you're both available to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty comfortable, I'm down there all the time, obviously, so I know what it's like, and
You can
Dick's been
walk
down
there.
there.
Yeah, I mean, I've been there plenty of
Yeah,
times too,
yeah.
but actually going there, meeting with
Yeah.
people, like
Yeah.
I say, I mean.
No, I think that's
we
more
haven't
than,
brought the land
I think they'd welcome the opportunity for people to go down and see it, so that's not a problem. I don't think we need to post the meeting if we get 2 people going, though, unless Craig wants to go down there as well, we can see, and if so, Diane, we can post it.
I'll tell the board if,
Yeah.
I'll ask the board if they want to, and if so.
Sure, yeah,
We'll post.
sure, okay.
Yeah, we'll have to find out when John's gonna be back.
Yep. Yep. Okay, we all set? So, motion, at this point, we'll delay that, you withdraw the motion.
Can we at
But
least
we'll
get
get it
this,
on the agenda for next time. Diane, let's make sure we've got copies for folks.
can we try to get Chris here too? Highway comment, see if this can be done next meeting? Well, I'm gonna have
Yeah.
the on-site anyway, I'll let you know.
Chris is here right now.
Oh, there's Chris.
Yeah, yeah.
Why don't you take
Have you seen the report yet on the head? Yeah, so, all right.
Okay, so we're gonna move on. Next thing on the agenda, thank you, folks. Do you have any other questions?
No.
Okay, thank you. Yep. Next, okay, well, next on the agenda is a bid award, and I'll turn over this to Steve, I guess.
Mr. Chairman, on Tuesday, October 15th, we opened bids to supply the town with a sweeper for the highway department. As you recall, sometime in late September, went before the board and presented them with the proposal to go out to bid using Chapter 90 funds. The board approved of going out to for that process. We followed through on that. The bid log shows there were 5 bid specifications were taken out, only 1 was returned. Altrui Brothers of East Providence submitted a bid of $223,131 delivered. It's a vacuum type sweeper. Currently, we received an allotment of Chapter 90 for $677,000. There was $58,000 in that fund prior to that. If we use the $223,000 in Chapter 90, it'll bring our allotment back down to $520,000. And we have a letter attached from Chapter 90 approving the use of Chapter 90 funds for that purpose. So my recommendation is make the bid award to the Altrui Brothers for that piece of equipment.
I make a motion, so move.
Second.
Discussion.
Can Steve,
Yes.
does anybody take a look at, I mean, it makes sense to go and buy this piece of equipment, right?
Yes.
Versus going in
The reason, one of the reasons is that we've had a input from the police department noting that we have to spend somewhere around $70,000-$80,000 in striping our roads. The roads are in dire need of striping, and they need sweeping. This piece of equipment won't be delivered until April. The current sweep we have is gonna cost us some $30,000 to repair it. I brought that before the board. Currently, we're spending like 300, Chris did a analysis indicating that contracting costs us $313,000 to do the job, where it would cost us $185 per mile for us to do the job. With all the sanding that we anticipate going on, it not only saves us on the condition of the road, but also it'll save us the proposal of having to clean out our catch basins. And street sweeping is an ongoing process. It's not only done once a year, it's done several times a year, depending on what the influx from the side of the road is on the roadway. And accidents have happened, and I hate bringing this up, it's really not a scare tactic, but we've had accidents happen where an intersection should have been swept, they're not swept, and motorcycle accidents have happened. So we need to take an action on this. In speaking with the contractor who delivers, I gave you the recommendation that this type of truck sweeper is a lot better for us. We had about 156 miles of road in Westport, and the kind of sweeping they had is really not conducive to sweeping for our type of area. So my recommendation.
You've answered the questions, or I should say, Chris, or the two of you. It looks like if we buy this piece of equipment, it costs $181 per mile to sweep. And if we continue to contract out, it's $313. So it looks like you've done exactly the kind of analysis that I would ask.
Yeah, and the other thing is sometimes you
Chris.
can't even pay $350 because you can't get somebody to sweep it when you need it to be done, so it backs up
We had
other
a
stuff.
difficult time.
We had that problem in the spring when we didn't have,
And one
couldn't
of
get
the-
somebody.
One of the issues too, that to repair the one that we have, which is basically known as, basically a three-wheeler, that's made for a city, short roads, around turning and all this other stuff. This here is made for long stretches, so
Long
even
runs.
if we spend $35,000-$40,000 on that piece of junk, it's not conducive to what we're gonna be using.
No, I agree.
That will break up again.
Can we get Chris,
Just bite the bullet and let's.
can we get Chris to help anybody else out, figure out whether stuff's worth buying? They come with proposals to us, because this is exactly what we need.
Yeah, this is we just got it, but this is great. I appreciate
Good job,
that.
Chris.
It gives you the detail. Well done. Any other questions? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, it's unanimous. Okay, next is a Highway Surveyor Search and Screen Committee. I think Jack had asked to put this on, and he has a memo, suggests that the board consider appointing a Highway Surveyor Search and Screen Committee composing of representative of the Finance Committee, Personnel Board, Board of Selectmen, Chief of Police, and former Highway Surveyor. Job descriptions in place. And so he said the charge would be, in his opinion, with reviewing applications, initial interviews, and recommending candidates to final interviews by the board, and he would provide staff assistance to the committee.
I thought we already voted on this,
No, Jack has been, he brought this around once before. Personally, I have a problem with the makeup of the committee. I'd rather see, I'm not going to embarrass him because I haven't talked to him, but I'd rather see the town planner on there, chair of the Conservation Commission, and maybe a couple of highway surveyors, former highway surveyors, and a member of the selectmen. So I would change some of the, not that the police department, the chief wouldn't be a good person, but I would think that if you get a couple of highway surveyors on there, it'd probably be a bit more practical to the job in terms of matching up job description and people that they're interviewing. And
So you're saying-
I think the chair of the conservation, we've got members that have been on conservation before, you know how close that conservation works on a day-to-day basis, and working with DEP, it's nice to have the chair as opposed to maybe the working foreman or something there, because those are the big cost items with us with DEP and the relationship with the highway department.
Planning board.
So the
And the
suggested,
planning board for the same reason. I mean, if you're gonna approve roads and structures and so forth, having the town planner involved in that process, I think makes sense
so
personally.
your suggested makeup is a finance committee member, a personnel board member.
I'm suggesting, not a finance committee member, I'm suggesting a town planner,
Town
chair-
planner instead of that, all right,
town planner, and instead of a member of the personnel board, the chair of the conservation commission.
okay.
Keep the board of selectmen,
Okay.
I'd scratch the chief of police, and I'd put in another highway surveyor if possible.
Second former highway surveyor.
Yeah, if they're available, why not?
Okay, all right, I'll move that we adopt that committee makeup for the search.
So that's a selectman, 2 highway surveyors, town planner, and a member, and the chairman of
I
conservation.
just don't see Concom on it, no.
Well, I think,
Well, you were in Concom before, weren't you?
Yeah, I was.
Yeah.
Very
Well,
minimal with the highway
and you
department.
two folks were on. I'll tell you, just as,
Stormwater, he's gotta follow what the Concom
Yeah,
says.
could-
He doesn't negotiate.
could I respond to it?
Yeah, I'm listening.
Okay. So all you 3 folks are members of COMCOM previously.
Correct.
The amount of time that's spent with this board dealing with DEP that relates to Conservation Commission and COMCOM is critical. And I think it's important that there's a sense with the person, and it's usually the chair, that is the person who has that negotiation with DEP, having an appreciation and understanding. I think that's a critical, saves the town money in the long run, short term. You guys will know better than I, because you served on COMCOM.
That's why I'm asking, I don't think it's necessary.
No.
I won't go for that, I
Yeah.
don't, for a highway surveyor, no, I mean, if
I
it's
would
an
suggest-
environmental position, yeah.
okay, I'll second your motion, Mike.
Well, I just to explain to Steve, I do agree, we've had a lot of issues. Having a member of Concom on the screening committee sends a message to the next highway surveyor, what's important.
And again, and this board here is just going through, by my understanding, this board here is just going through, making a recommendation. It's gonna be voted on by the full board.
Yeah, it's just reviewing the job description with the
It's what's
applications.
coming at us.
That's right.
It's not, it's a decision maker.
Okay, so we got a motion and a second on the floor. Any other discussion on that?
Is this effective immediately, start this?
Well, we haven't taken a vote on it yet.
Okay.
So that's the next thing we'd have to do, if you decide you're going to have such a group. All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
I'm against.
Chair votes aye, it's 3-1. Okay, now we have a committee. Now, my understanding is the court case is going to be delayed until January 14th now. So one of the issues that I would have as a member of this board would be the timing of this. I know Jack put it on, thoughts on that, Steve?
No, I
in
didn't
terms-
speak to him on it.
He seems like he wants to move this right now. I would suggest that we have a person in place, and we have a decision that the courts are going to be involved in, and I think we have some responsibility for that position. We can have an acting person in there, which we do. Chris Gonzalez is in there. So I think effective in the next budget period anyways, the town meeting has required that become an appointed as opposed to elected. But up until that time, if something happened at the court level, that person would be entitled to come back to that position, I would think. So, and if it doesn't, then I think we could act on it. So I'd be a little bit sensitive to having 2 people in the same position. You really can't do that. So I'm not quite sure why we're putting this on now, but we certainly can advertise and look at applications. We have the job description in place, so my suggestion is, you look at this maybe in January to start advertising it, and then maybe you review the applications in February. You make an appointment sometime in March or something, and to be effective,
That's fine.
the next budget period or after town meeting, I guess.
Yeah, we can't think about hiring somebody before April anyway.
I would think not, unless other circumstances move forward.
So
And
do you
probably,
want
if we're gonna have this person come in and all that, you probably, the way we're going now, maybe we could, say, the fiscal year start off clean, July 1st, I mean, because we don't know what's gonna happen in, April. In April, we know if we go to a point versus the elected, but at that point, we can start on, say July 1st.
I mean, we have, it's not like we don't have somebody.
That's right.
We have a person that's doing a
That's
job.
what I'm saying. If we had nobody there,
And the job description is the same job description we had when it was an elected position, basically, and all we're doing is in-house as well as outside, so this is certainly something that we would encourage you to apply for too, Chris. We hope you would. I mean, you're doing a job right now. And, I think that unless the board feels differently, why don't we suggest that we would start applications effective January 15th or something. We can always adjust that if we need to later on, but I don't think we'd start advertising before January 15th. Advertise for 30 days. That gets you into the middle of February, and then the committee that we just appointed will then start looking and reviewing applications and make some recommendations. At some point, we need to decide the number that we want to come before us. If people meet the qualifications, and do they do initial interviews and come up with suggesting, 5 or 7 or 3 or whatever, you might want to think about that. You don't have to decide that tonight, but at some point, we think about that.
Well, one thing we can think about tonight is who we put on that committee from our board, and I can tell you, I'm pretty tapped out. I don't know, Dick, are you interested?
I'd be interested too, either way.
Well, you want me to nominate somebody, or is somebody else going to nominate? I'm the chair.
Just letting you know, I'd be interested in it, obviously. 'cause I'm concerned.
Somebody nominate, then.
You want to nominate somebody to see how you brought it up?
Well, I was gonna nominate Dick. I didn't know Steve would be interested, and I know Dick's worked a lot with Chris and with the department over the last year or two, so that's the only thing I was gonna suggest.
Can I second my own thing?
I mean, as chair, I'd gladly, and Steve's interested as well. So you got a motion and a second on the floor. Discussion on that? Or you want to wait?
Yeah, like I said, I just have concern with the appointments, the way it was put on, and I'd like to oversee it. I think we've had some problems with some of the recent appointments, and I just have a lot of concern in the hiring process, that's all.
Well, the appointment's going to be at this board level, where all 5 board members are responsible for that appointment.
Yep.
So that's going to happen.
I understand how the process goes.
Yep. So, I mean, I don't have any problem with the motion on the floor. I think Dick has spent 2 years as chair of the committee and went through this whole process with going from elected to appointed, and dealt with some of the issues associated with it, so.
So that's what we did, how we did it when we did the town administrator.
I don't have, I mean, basically, any one of us would represent just one of 5 people on there, and it comes back to us, so, it's, I don't see, I mean, all you're doing is you're looking at applications and see how those applications match up with the job description, and then we're gonna give them a charge beyond that. I mean, Jack is providing staff assist, I'm really not even sure what that's about, because it's, have the applications go to the committee and review it, so I don't, most of that decision-making is gonna be with us. We're gonna
It's
have
not
to
the end of the
look
world
at
if
the
Dick's on it,
applications.
that's fine, we're still gonna have some input in it,
Yeah, definitely.
so.
Every one of us,
Do what you gotta
all
do.
5 members. This will be a vote of this board. That's our responsibility. Okay, motion on the floor in a second. All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye.
I'm against.
Okay, chair votes aye, it's 3-1.
I
So
just
at
have a
least-
clarification. It's town planner, Concom chair?
Yes, chair of COMCOM,
Okay.
Board of
then-
Selectmen, which is Dick Spillette, and then 2 highway surveyors. If we can get them.
We've nominated one by name. Do we have another?
Well, I'm not putting any names out until they figure out the highway surveyors. We can ask, that's one of the things we could do now, is see any highway, you can put a notice out, the former highway surveyors. We're gonna be doing an interview process. Anybody interested, they can, apply for the position, and we'll appoint a couple of people.
Give it to
Jim's
We did have somebody that was.
Jim's here.
non-advised.
He can acquiesce to our request, but what about Concom chair? We need to put a request out to him if he wants to join us.
Yeah, right, and we just took the vote tonight, so
Okay.
we'll ask those folks if they want to, and we won't ask the town planner to make a commitment one or the other, but over the next day or so, we'll say, by the way, you attended a meeting, and we wonder what your thoughts would
Then
be.
your job description next time.
Yeah, but I think it's important because town planning,
Yeah.
For the record.
roadways, store, heights and all that, yeah, critical.
Give it to Diane.
Question and answers, I guess there are none, okay. Next is the proposed bylaw annual town meeting. This is really it's a second reading of what we talked about last time. I don't know if anybody's suggesting any changes to it or whatever. I don't think I have to read it again. It's addressing the conflict of interest requirements within our community. Not everybody has a bylaw with conflict of interest because there's a state law, but I'm suggesting that we do this. This came under recommendations from Copeland and Page as well. They thought it was a good idea, and a number of towns are putting this in because it provides a little bit more of awareness to folks serving on for the town in various capacities, whether elected or appointed, to responsibilities under the general law relating to conflict of interest.
The problem I had is there's no leg to it. What happens if they don't do it? There's no penalty.
Well, that's something that we could, as a board, put in as a penalty. The penalty at the state level is up to $10,000 for offense. So one of the things we could do, in some cases, it's by way of lack of information, that sometimes people assume that they've met the criteria, or they've filed a disclosure, and so once they file it, they assume there's nothing else they have to do. So I think if we have a bylaw, it might help us, it might take some of that initiation. What I've tried to do as a chair is talk to Jack Healy, or talk to town council, and ask them to review a concern, and if they felt the same way, to address the people that are involved, because that's kind of a way of trying to address it without embarrassing anybody, and maybe other people may feel that that's not a conflict or whatever. But if it goes to where you file at the state level, then you trigger the fine and so forth, and I'm not sure, without giving the chance locally to work, that we should just go to the state level first.
Well, and plus, this can be a condition of serving. It deals not so much with the elected, because the elected, I think, you didn't meet the criteria, you didn't do what you were supposed to do. At that point, if you don't do it, we're gonna forward it to the state, which is gonna have the teeth in it. This other stuff, if it's somebody that we appoint to a committee, and the person refuses to do it, like we do now, you gotta take conflict of interest and open meeting law, and you don't do it, that's a condition of serving. If not, you're not appointed.
Well, it should be on there, that's what I'm saying. I agree, it's just not.
That's how we can enforce that. I mean, no monetary fine, but I think it's something that.
No, but it should be stated that failure to do so could result in termination.
So it's enough, put another sentence inside there.
Yeah, that's what I think.
Well, I'd like to start off at least addressing it. Sometimes you do more with a carrot than...
It's a start, but
Yeah.
with the
Yeah.
emphasis that there should be some leg to it,
Yep.
it's just a general.
I'll second that.
Can I ask a question, Tony? Can this be characterized as a sort of a concise summary of 268, General Law 268, Chapter 268A? Or have we pulled in other things?
No, it's a summary of 268, but it also addresses some sections within the summary to reinforce. In fairness to some folks, I think this law changes, and it's going to change probably for the opposite. If you read this past couple of days, they're going the opposite way, where folks can have a direct conflict, and the state will recognize it. So it may change again. But right now, the way it's set up, there are some people that are assuming they're following the law properly, and without some guidance from the chair or from the appointing authority, they're not going to know. And so what do? You file at the state level and get them in trouble on something that was just, maybe by a little nudging from a chair or appointing authority that would be addressed, and that's where I think we ought to do to start off with. I don't think we should go to a heavy hammer initially if we can solve the problem in another way. It comes costly to the individual and the town, and in some cases it's done in all innocence to some degree, with a misunderstanding.
So it's a concise reading of 268, written in plain language, and meant to bring local, little bit of local jurisdiction and oversight to a state where we have all state oversight right now. Is that?
Yes, and it helps provide some direct responsibility to the town to enforce as they do other bylaws. Now, if you want to put, as Steve rightfully had said, let's put some fine to it, whatever, you could do that. I would suggest we try it this way first and see how that works, because it might be just with a little nudging from the appointing authority or from the chair that people can kind of agree that, well, maybe I can step away from the table if I have a disclosure or so, whatever the issue may be,
I just want to make it clear, I don't mean if somebody didn't do it within a week, they're gone. It would be some kind of caveat, failure to do so within 6 months could result in termination, something to that effect. 90 days.
I mean, the way it stands now is all you have to do is file, and then it becomes, it's kicked in, and there's a penalty associated with it. And I hate to do that without attempting something at the town level first. Right now, I think it's a little unclear, even at the town administrator's level, in terms of what the responsibility would be on their part to follow through. I think it's coming a little clearer with Jack in terms of what his role would be in discussion with things. And sometimes if you and I are chair of a committee, somebody comes before us and talks about members of our committee, we may get a little defensive about the members as opposed to maybe looking at this, well, there's a bylaw as well. We're not talking about state law, but can we at least have a conversation, and if the shoe fits, let's do something about it. If not, no problem. But at least this goes on record. I feel very comfortable if we have a bylaw and we haven't followed the bylaw and we have to take it to the state level, we've done all we can and exhausted it at the town level before it becomes an embarrassment on an individual or a family or whatever that doesn't need to be, you know?
Understood, understood.
Okay. A motion and a second on the floor. Any other discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, it's unanimous. All right, approval of regular minutes, October 28th, and special minutes, November 5th. I have a problem with the minutes, Diane, on the 28th. And in the minutes, we spent a lot of time on the affordable housing piece, but I think there's some critical pieces that I don't see in here. When we get down on page 3 of 5, we talk about Mr. Healy was not aware of speaking with Dartmouth. I thought he was not aware of how the Mass Works grant application was submitted and the involvement in it. But I think if you check the tape, there may be some things that were left out. You know, I remember asking the questions, who wrote the grant? Who requested the board signature? I asked him, I asked you. I don't see that in here. And I think that both people acknowledged that they were not involved in it. And I think Warren Messier came before us and insisted on talking about the Copeland and Page's role involved in this. I don't see that in here at all. And I think those are critical pieces and lead to some of the, at least frustration I have, when we're asked to sign off on 1.9 million and have an understanding of who knew what. In addition, I think Mr. Dutra and Brian Curry had both mentioned at the end, after we went through the gavel and everything else, at the end of that discussion, they acknowledged the fact that they weren't aware of some of the particulars associated with the 1.9. I don't see that in here. And I think that's, I mean, if we're going to put in this much space associated with that, I think those are critical pieces that should be included in the minutes. And so I don't know if we're prepared to do it now, but I would suggest that maybe we go back and document that a little bit differently. I think that we tend to put a lot more than it's necessary in most of our minutes, but those are areas by omission that I think send a different message out to what was discussed that evening. And I don't think it's necessarily in that particular area is representative of what was discussed and it's on tape.
So we'll move that one.
We do correct it and bring it back at our next meeting.
Bring it back. Do we need a motion for that?
A lot of the 1.9 on page 3, you see that, right? Go back and forth, and pretty
Yeah.
much what you stated
Yeah.
is on 3, but I wasn't there, so.
Well, let me give you an example of where I'm going, because in our packets, we also received Affordable Housing Trust minutes of September 25th. Mr. Messier, Mrs. Collins, Elaine Ostroff, Craig, and Brian were at that meeting. And in there, we talk about Nokichoke Village in L.A., which I assume is Leonardi, had submitted a memo on 9/18/13, meeting with TCB and town representatives. So I don't know who they were, but, you know, they go on. A meeting with the Dartmouth Board of Health was scheduled by TCB for September 25th. That's a month before we had this meeting on wastewater systems. And various agencies would be participating. There's also a note in here for the town planner who made a presentation, and the information was withdrawn from the minutes, so I don't even know if it's related to that. But there's some questions in terms of still trying to get a handle on how we move forward with this, and the best way of doing that, have an understanding of who said what and what our responsibilities are.
All right, before you finish it off on the motion, though, there's another small error in here, I noticed that wasn't there, but do you want that, or are you just trying to straighten out that paragraph?
I think the paragraph is critical, because I'll point to another one. We also, in our packets,
there's one.
received Copeland and Page's bill, and the bill for September 11th, telephone conversation with town manager, board of town to authorize to apply for a Mass Works grant, review Mass Works program materials, send response to the town manager. I mean, I want to talk to Jack about this, because I don't understand why we're getting billed for something that nobody knew anything about.
I thought you asked for that, but, all right, that's something separate, though. I'm talking about the minutes that we're on right now.
Yeah, I mean, you signed the request for proposals. You were chair at the time, and Michael Coughlin.
Right.
A lot of this relates to how we got to where we're at and where we want to go from here.
Where you want to go from here is what you guys are chopping up now, but, all right, anyways,
Well, you weren't at the meeting that this stuff came up, this discussion.
I wasn't at the last meeting here, I was at the Macumber.
That's what
I've been
I'm
at
talking
several
about.
other meetings,
This is
we
the
had them
minutes,
here.
this
Right.
is the minutes for the last meeting.
Right, I know, that's what I'm telling you.
Right.
But if you look, it's just a general mistake. Page 5, number 1, another business, it just says the board voted four in favor, 2 absent, Spurlett and Willett. So you got a total of 6 there, I just don't know. I don't know if Spurlett was not in the room and the numbers messed up. Oh, okay, so it's 3 then. Okay, just wanted to bring that to your attention.
So I just asked Diane if you take a look at that, and have that a bit more representative of what the tape was talking about. And it'll give us a chance when Jack comes back, we can talk a little bit about the other piece. Again, I'm on the understanding that this board would like to move forward with an affordable housing program. I don't think, I mean, there's a bit misunderstanding out there that because of discussions and so forth, that the board's opposed to it. I, for one, am not opposed to it. I'm opposed to the present state and how we're getting there, but I think we can bring this back together and, you know, be all supportive of this. Am I speaking for the board when I'm saying this?
It's all you, whatever you want to bring forward.
It's
discuss,
all me?
do it. Well, Mr. Sullivan, bring forward what you want, and let's work the bugs out.
So you don't have any problems with where we're at right now, is that what you're saying?
I don't mind you researching, I don't have a problem with it at all, but let's
Okay.
just stay with it before we have to allow 40Bs, that's my big concern. Everybody's worried about affordable housing and getting, you know, Section 8 in here, but if 40B comes, it's, in my opinion, a lot worse.
Well, some 40Bs have come, and
Friendly 40Bs and there's other 40Bs. We got property for sale all over town.
Right.
They could put 100 houses in within a year.
Right. So it doesn't have to be one or the other, though, right? You know,
What doesn't have to be one or the other?
we're not looking at one extreme or the other extreme.
No, just
Right.
take in whatever you need to do, let's, get it done.
I would encourage that we all do that. You know, I mean, I don't think this is a battle that I have to fight myself. I would certainly fight it, but I would think that, you know, we all are equal on this board, and we all can agree or disagree.
We have a meeting
direction
coming
we're
up,
going.
don't we, next week? With, are we sticking to that plan?
Yeah, and let me explain, the reason for the meeting next week has to do with the Board of Health asking questions that I couldn't answer. And I called Ms.
I'm meeting
Dutra.
with us.
I'm meeting with the Board of Health next week, and I asked Diane to let other board members know, because we were asked, both Jack and I were asked questions that related to the Mass Works grant and related to water issues associated with Nokichoke Village, public water supply, and wastewater issues that I couldn't answer. And I put a call into the leadership of the group and asked, this last meeting, part of these minutes reflect the fact that they were going to get back to us with some dates to have a meeting with the group, and right now, their position is they're not
What's the
ready to
date?
do that.
When's that date?
Next Monday.
We're meeting with the Board of Health next Monday, because they're trying to ask us questions. So,
Here.
at the Board of Health, it's on their agenda. So I was asking for help from the group to answer some of those
But what do
questions
you
myself.
expect to get without the plans?
Without what plans?
Without the layout, without the final plans?
I'm going to
And
respond,
tests.
I'm going to respond to their questions that they have. They've asked me to do that. What am I going to do? Tell them I'm not going to respond?
Who's they? You're losing
Board
me.
of Health.
Board of Health's asking you about
The Board of Health is asking us as a Board of Selectmen on water and wastewater planning in the coordination with the public health requirements for the Board of Health. They asked Jack Healy, they asked myself, and I asked and reached out to affordable housing, because at the last meeting, the affordable housing folks said they were going to try to come up with some dates. Brian Curry, Warren Messier, and Craig had all suggested they'd like to have a meeting with this board. I'm trying to reach out to have the meeting. I can't, at this point, control when they're going to have the meeting or not. I was told by others in leadership on that group that Diane was trying to set up a meeting as well, and they couldn't come up with any dates and didn't want to suggest any dates to us in the immediate future.
I'm just wondering what our expertise is in that's all. I mean, I can see.
Well, I'll tell you, the expertise is, as chair of the board, you signed on the request for proposal,
Yep.
and that's a $15 million project. And as chair of the board now, I signed off on a $1.9 million that, you know, I can answer best I can, and based on what members of this board who serve in that committee had told me that what their intentions were with the 1.9. Outside of that, they need to have some discussion with members of the Affordable Housing Trust.
What time is that meeting, the Board of Health?
I haven't got the agenda yet. Have you got that done?
Well,
They meet at
7:30 is what I had.
Yeah, I don't even know that. Are we all set? We're getting a little off track here on that one. How
No, I
about
mean,
the
it's
special?
just very, very unusual for us to be answering water questions, that's all.
Well, at the last meeting, Steve,
Yeah.
that you weren't at, we
Correct.
tried to get some details on the 1.9 million request for a MassWorks grant that we were requested to sign off on.
Right.
Okay? We're still trying to get the details on that. It looks like there were some conversations with the town of Dartmouth, okay, that were done by town officials. I'm not sure who they were.
Yeah, everybody pokes around with Dartmouth, we've been doing it for years, okay. What's the point, though?
Well, have you seen the Mass grant for the 1.9?
Not recently.
Okay, then you take a look at it, you might be
What
able to
is
see
the,
what
why don't you just let the public know what the major point is, if we're gonna have a special meeting on it? I don't understand.
let me say again, the Board of Health had some concerns and public health requirements associated with it, because according to the Board of Health, they may be incorrect in this, but what we were told was that they did not have any information from the Affordable Housing Trust as it relates to the public health requirements associated with Nokichoke. And I said, well, you really need to talk to them. What I can respond to is, yes, I did sign off on the MassWorks. To the best of my knowledge, I can explain to you what they've told me and what this grant represents. So,
Okay.
okay?
I mean, yeah, it's all general knowledge.
So, I mean, I know you all put it up to the rest, my understanding is I read that when it came as an email, you put it out to just, not so much we're taking part in the discussion, go there and listen to see what they're saying, that's not something.
Okay, we're gonna hold on the 28th, and we're gonna go, if we can, I don't mean to cut you off, Steve, Dick, I think you're done with that, though. And we're gonna, the special meeting minutes for November 5th.
I'll move them as written.
Second.
Any questions? Hearing none?
Was I president?
Oh, it's Steve.
That was, Steve, you were there, that was.
Oh, that's town meeting, yes, okay.
Yeah.
That was town meeting,
Yeah.
basically, it was a vote at town meeting.
Yep, all set.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, it's unanimous. Okay, the town administrator's report, I think we had one in here.
Yeah, yeah, the meeting dates and stuff.
Yeah, I think that's just by reading purposes in terms of what Jack was doing for that period of time. There is in our packets this evening some information that Diane had put together under Jack's request and dated November 12th. And one of the things on there relates to Jack's report, and that's the credit for the operations and maintenance of a drinking water distribution system. Basically, when we flush, we're paying at the rate of drinking the water. And with a new contract, we agreed that we would come up with an alternative. We have an alternative now to paying the same rate, and that's getting a credit for 90% of the water we're using when we flush. And the document that you have gives us that credit. So it's in our packet tonight as a policy that we'd like to go forward with, because we met last, I don't know, Friday or Thursday or something with Fall River. And what we're trying to do with DEP is, after we get this in place, in addition to do the flushing, the city of Fall River has agreed to try to work with us on doing some bleeding of the system. That's kind of like leaving the faucet open at the Southport top of pond, if you would. But that would be at no expense to us, but we need to have this in place before we can go to the next step. The bleeding is something they do in major cities to cut down on the, well, you know better than I in terms of keep it going. So it may be a way, if we do a little bit of bleeding, that, you know, and it's sad to say, but you keep the faucet open and the water goes into the Southport top of pond. But by doing that, we might be able to show some testing results from that with DEP that will look favorably on a delay for the water treatment piece. So we got a motion on the floor to approve this document, which is really agreeing that we would sign off on getting a credit of 90% of flushing. That's the first step. Then the second one would be on the bleeding.
So the flushed water will cost us 10%?
10%.
Got it.
No, yeah. That's a pretty good deal.
Yeah, I would say.
And, okay, any other discussions on it? All those in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. That's a done deal, and we'll contact Fall River and let them know we've signed off on that, and if you could prepare the paperwork, Diane, so as soon as they get that, the next day I want to call them about the bleeding. And the idea is to bleed on both ends of the line a little bit as well, to see if we can do some flushing out that way. Next one we have is two other things that were in that same sheet.
The request for Jim Honnet this year.
A request from Jim Honnet, Town Planner, regarding approval of Community Innovation Challenge Grant. Jim received this, I guess, at 3:30 today, according to this. And Jim, I'll let you come up and talk a little bit about it. It's a little unusual to get a grant and ask us to talk about it, but I'm sure you have a reason. And certainly, the chair of the board's here as well from planning. Please join.
sorry about the late notice, but these grants, when you're putting them together, especially with other communities, tend to come in towards the last minute. This grant is due on the 22nd of November. In order to do it as a regional grant with Westport, Fall River, Freetown, Rehoboth, Mattapoisett, and New Bedford, we got to get the signatures done by Wednesday of next week, so we need the blessing of the selectmen for this grant. And what the grant is it's a flyover for the town. We'd get new aerial photographs. It's 3-inch pixel resolution, which is very good for flyover. It's the newest technology. You can see that on our computers now with the GIS system. It's the same type of mapping. It's going to be more detailed. It'll give us the planimetrics, which is also the buildings, the roads, the pavement lines, the tree lines, and it'll give us the contours, 2-foot contours, which are very good. And you know, in the other community I worked in, we had 2-foot contours, and the engineers actually used that as preliminary design work, not the final stuff they go out and do themselves, but preliminary design work. It is very accurate, and it's a great system, and it's getting used more and more. The grant itself is a Community Innovation Challenge grant, and you have to show that it improves efficiency within communities, and if you can collaborate with other communities, it gives you a leg up on the application process. As far as efficiencies go, the GIS system itself is already cut down on the walk-ins and the time that some of the departments are putting into a lot of their projects. You know, the appraisers, the real estate agents, and now the public is starting to look into the system more and more and get assessor information, get wetlands information, floodplain, zoning. This can all be looked up at home any time of the day, and it cuts down on the office visits. It improves our staff time and improves the efficiency of the public as well. The grant itself, because Westport is one of the larger communities, or is the largest community of the 6 that are applying, we would be appropriated $97,089 of the grant. It goes by square miles. We're 52. Rehoboth is 46, and then it goes down from there. The administration course is going to be run through Serpent. So there's about $15,000 in admin costs. That would, well, about $5,000 goes to Serpent, and the $9,000 would be for additional computers and software, which would be distributed to the towns. Again, it's we're applying for the grant. It'd be great if we can get it. These aerial photography is used quite a bit by all the communities and the public. So,
and no expense on our part besides your time.
That's a big point. No matching funds for this grant.
Right. I'll move it.
Motion on the floor?
Second.
A second. What's impressive here is very seldom do we ever apply for a grant that we get more than the city of New Bedford and a town added together. So just in that principle alone, you got my support on it, because, you know, it's based on the square miles, and Westport, you could add Mattapoisett and New Bedford together and we still get more than they do, so that's pretty nice. This is to our advantage.
Plus, I think it adds a layer to what we have already.
Yeah.
And also makes the groundwork for maybe a future CIC grant application from Westport, Fall River, Dartmouth together, that would incorporate all this information here, that would be a relational database that, for instance, the highway department could look up stormwater courses, find out where this particular catch basin goes. How often should you clean it? If there's a problem, where does it flood? Who owns the easement? Is there an easement for the water that goes through that thing? Those kinds of things, I think, would be very, very useful, but you have to have this first.
I think you're gonna, Jim and I saw a presentation of Serpent.
Yeah, Steve's our representative for Serpent on the board as well. Dick, the last page kind of talks about the total grant and the breakdown. It's based on miles, so, you know, Westport having the largest land area of that group, you know, we get the big portion of that grant. So, you know, I applaud the town planner and the planning board for their efforts in this, and I don't see how the town loses on this one. It's a great opportunity. You know, it's kind of difficult. And our representative for Serpent.
No, not the rep, Serpent themselves, Ross Perrin.
Yeah. No, I think this is great. Going to call the question?
Yep.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. It's unusual that we vote on it the same night, so we're breaking our own rule, but there's a reason for it.
Yeah.
And rules sometimes are made to be broken.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Thanks for waiting.
Good job. Sorry it took so long.
Meeting this week or next week?
Okay, was there anything else on there? We did a recommendation regarding Lieutenant Bells. We have that information. Those were the three, Diane, that you had in our packet, so I think we're done with that. Do we have anything else, Steve, that we need to address?
I just want to report to the board that the work on the roof commences to start next Monday. Slate removal and replacement. The painter's already been here this weekend, scraping and doing some painting. Still has to paint the cupola. And we'll have to notify the rest of the departments that no parking close to the building until the job is done. Also, the received proposals to repair the police department roof. That was due to the fact that they've experienced some leaks. About 5 years ago, a job was done there by an outside contractor to repair the roof. It wasn't done according to the specifications. It should have been done, and so we've notified town council to pursue that. And we find that the contractor has filed bankruptcy, is no longer in business, so we're trying to put a claim somewhere else, trying to get this, but in any instance, we have to have that roof repaired quite quickly.
Bond isn't this long.
No, the job's only $26,000 to begin with, so they don't bond that.
Okay.
You have 5 items for action on this?
Correspondence.
Yeah.
Okay.
Correspondence action required for our meeting for November 12th. Request was received by the Daughters of the American Revolution proclaiming National American Indian Heritage Month.
I'll move it.
Motion made. Have a second?
Second.
Any questions, discussion? There's an appropriate proclamation, but it's pretty much in summary, it's declaring the November as a National American Indian Heritage Month. And you can go to the website, www.dar.org, for further information in regards to that. Thanks, Steve. All those in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, it's unanimous. Request was made of a 38 Ward Tupper for a blind child sign with police recommendation attached.
So moved.
Motion made.
Second. The recommendation is to put up the signs.
The recommendation is to place the blind child sign at 38 Ward Tupper. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, it's unanimous. Notice was received by Mass DOT and Mass Housing Economic Development announcing the award of the 6th round of technical assistant grants. I'm not sure that there's no action necessarily on that, just received.
Say we got 15, right?
Yeah.
And that's Jim and Jim that just left and
Yep.
legwork on that.
Yep.
And economic development, we're pushing for that too. So.
Steve happens to be the chair of economic development, so.
Wasn't too long.
I'm just saying, that's why I was giving you credit for it, so.
That was
All
a
right.
committee decision,
All right.
which you
Yeah.
are on too.
Yeah, but, this brown nose in this chair of the committee, that's all. Okay, the last one is, Police Department recommendation received on Beach Avenue for signage and gate relocation. I don't know that it's action needed for it. I think there's informational. I'm not sure I'd even agree with the recommendation, and there's nobody here to discuss it, so. I think we're working under direction for Jack is working with conservation and in terms of where the location should be. I think there's some discussion of whether we can do something with the trustees of reservation. At some point, they said they were going to get back to us with a turnaround, so it might be premature to address that one at this point. We do have another one that we received from the Westport Fishermen Association, and they were requesting, I guess they're assuming we had a meeting with Brian Howes, Mass, on the grant. They said after correspondence with Brian Howes on the subject, it came to their attention that there was a meeting with a few of interested parties on the study. This is the estuary studies, which the Fishermen's Association was not part of, because they were not sure who called the meeting. They were inquiring who was involved, and in an effort to be aware of the status of the study going forward, they'd like to be included. I think we were too. I mean, I wasn't aware that we had a meeting.
Refer this to Water Resources and...
Well, Water Resources had asked Jack some months ago to write a letter to Brian Howes suggesting that we were appointed a contact. I'm a member of the Water Resource Committee and actually chair that right now, and I can tell you, we never received notification of Brian meeting with anybody, so I'm not sure who these other interested parties were, but, Diane, we can get back to the Fishermen Association and say we certainly recognize they made a contribution through CPC and we'll support that, but this board is not aware of a meeting taking place. But we have identified through the town administrator that the Water Resource Committee would be the point of contact, and Water Resource Committee in turn has taken a vote that they would notify the Board of Health before any action on this, so, not Board of Health, the Board of Selectmen, so we share their concerns about this. And it might be just misunderstanding, you know, maybe there wasn't such a meeting, but the assumption is here that there was. Any other correspondence? I think we're pretty well set on that. Anything else coming before the board? We have to go into executive session to approve executive minutes for October 28th, but before we do that, go around the table.
I'm all set.
Just very briefly, good job at Veterans Day yesterday, just the usual technical difficulties with the microphone that's been going on for 20-plus years. But especially
You are the
Dick and
chair.
Tony for
You
the
are the
service.
chair of the Cable Advisory Group, aren't you?
No hobble English. And then, yeah, so again, it was a pretty good turnout. It was cool out. You know, the veterans were a little cold. You know, it was great to see the turnout. The other thing is, just for future, Tony, cemetery. If we can start working on the expansion that we had a report and everything years ago, we might want to stop poking around on that when things get slow. Because our cemetery is almost at capacity, and it was, you know, the board members might want to get familiarized with, I think it was Jane Lewis put a study together, just to review it, sooner or later. Unfortunately, it's filling up.
I'll second Steve's recognition of Jerry LaBeouf and the service organizations for a nice event on Monday. And also just like to recognize Steve. One of the things we charged him with when we hired him was to come up with a starting point, come up with a budget, and he alluded to the fact that there's a lot of help there. Those are bottom-up numbers. Those aren't just top-line figures that we've thrown together. Those are bottom-up numbers that everybody's worked to put together. So thanks to you, Steve, and thanks to the rest of the staff for getting that starting point for us.
I would support both Michael's comments and Steve Ouellette's on the veterans and Jerry LaBeouf's situation and his contribution and involvement and support. And I think he did a great job with the Veterans Day activities and leading up to that with the trying to coordinate transportation and everything associated with it. But Steve, I appreciate the work that you've done, and the fact that everybody's upset about the budget suggests you probably did a good job, because you don't have one side happy and the other side unhappy. They're all unhappy.
Ain't seen nothing yet.
I do think that, if you can, Steve, I think there's a town administrators meeting coming up regionally. The next one, I think, is in Acushnet. And I know Acushnet has a cable on demand over there, and I'd ask when you went over there, if you would, to check with the cable on demand. Because one of the things they do is they have their normal programming, but they can also tie in, the school department has, they do it through their own computer, where you can do the streaming of their meetings. But it might be something that we should look at as a town in our cable moving forward, where the programs can be on demand, where we, you know, if we don't want to see something that's 6 months old that happens to be on 3 times a week, we could look at something that happened last night or something, you know. People can make those choices if it's on demand. And I know Acushnet does that. They're not the only one, but where you're going to have your meeting there with the fellow town administrators might be something to look at a little closer and talk to the cable people when you're over there. And secondly, I really think, all kidding aside, we need to look at cable. And, you know, town meeting, what I'm hearing is the first part of that town meeting, people couldn't hear. It was going off the air, coming back on the air. And the quality of what we're doing is not up to standard.
No, and we definitely do want to have a meeting. We had one member that couldn't come while the World Series was on, and right now we've got to turn around with the superintendent, but seriously, that is a priority, and we were letting the superintendent get her feet wet, the interim, and obviously this is important. I agree. And Dick and I are on that. So.
Yeah. And that's not to point the finger at anybody, but I think we need to kind of move it to the next level on, you know, we can tease individual members about not being heard, but I think it goes way beyond that.
I want his mic.
Sometimes it doesn't occur.
Okay, I'd entertain a motion to go into executive session.
I, Mike Sullivan, move that we move into executive session pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 38, Section 21, to approve executive minutes